be attributable to human error.
I was joking around talking about.
Hello and welcome to the SciPhi Show.
Hello.
You gotta love it. There's 5 seconds. I'll just carry on chatting.
Don't silence me.
We would never. We would never. So, yes. Hello and welcome to the SciPhi Show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave.
I'm Luke.
He's Philip.
I'm Philip.
I'm Brina Ryce.
Now, I don't know if you remember Brina from our end of month AMA that we did quite a while ago. We haven't done an end of month AMA in a while. But Brina, would you just like to tell people a little bit about yourself before we start the stream?
Yeah, I'm a fellow YouTuber. I post. I guess my channel originally grew from talking about things like emotional abuse and power dynamics and power imbalances and how those can easily become toxic. But other than that, I pretty much talk about whatever I want to talk about on my channel. I am also a fellow skeptic and atheist. And yeah, if you want to come check me out, you can find me on YouTube at Brina Ryce, Instagram at Brina Ryce, and Twitter at Rice Trash. Rice with a Y, by the way.
And yeah, I'll tell you what, I will quickly drop a link into the chat room for anybody who wants to check you out and subscribe. But
yeah,
tonight,
thank you.
Obviously, we're discussing, power dynamics and big YouTube creators. Now, this stream is actually an extension of a stream that Dave and I did. God, it must be almost a year ago now, thinking about it,
Last
Dave.
year, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely last year. I just don't know specifically when. And we were talking about YouTube and the YouTube algorithm as an expression of power. Dave, do you just want to give us a quick overview of what we meant by that, and then we'll get into tonight's show?
What the reporting thing in YouTube, like the stream we did last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a brief,
Basically, certain communities can control the kind of conversations that go on in YouTube by using the reporting facility. So if a left-wing YouTuber is saying something that the right doesn't particularly like, they can report bomb that YouTuber and kind of control the discussion and stop the discussion happening.
Yeah.
And YouTube can also kind of affect that by their terrible promotion in the aim of balance, because lots of right-wing stuff gets promoted over left-wing.
Yeah, I mean, you notice that yourself, don't you? You get a ton of that sort of thing popping up into you. You get loads of right-wing stuff. Oddly, that's not the sort of thing that jumps up into mine. I get generally workout videos. They're the things that pop up into mind, or music. So, yeah, I mean, I guess just because I work out, I don't really care about like watching loads of workout videos, but the music stuff I'm generally interested in. But as you said, the algorithm can pick and choose things, and it can be an expression of power in the sense that it can force a lot of content down your throat if you follow everything that it says. So tonight we're actually talking about power dynamics and big YouTube creators. So Dave, do you just want to explain what is meant by a power dynamic?
The relationship between two people or two agents or two groups of agents, and the one who has the ability to shape discussions or make people do what they don't want to do, or create an outlook, or even stop the smaller creators from being seen simply because the bigger kind of YouTube creator has the power to kind of keep them out of the community.
We were even having a little discussion about this the other day, Brina, weren't we? Saying that technically us inviting you on our stream creates a bit of a power dynamic. And there's a few that we can speak about.
Right, because I said I was talking about how power dynamics really can exist between anyone in some form. They could be financial, a physical type of power imbalance where somebody's stronger than the other. Maybe it has to do with professions. Maybe again with YouTube, it has to do with somebody having a larger platform than their fellow creators. So yeah, I mean, they exist everywhere. It's just a matter of how you're navigating it. And I think the biggest sign of somebody abusing power is when it does become a pattern and you're seeing it happen again and again and again.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And if we think about here tonight, obviously, hopefully none of us feel that there is, a specific power dynamic going on. But obviously, you're on a stream with four regulars, and you could feel that there is a power dynamic there. You could also make a comment
but that's okay, though. I don't know that would actually be a bad thing. Like, it's okay to recognize that it's there. I mean, I'm on your guys' channel, right? Like, so I think there can be a certain respect that could be found in a power dynamic because maybe it's there out of respect. So yeah, I mean, I guess I think because I spend so much time criticizing them, people like to conflate what I say sometimes. So I want to be clear that it's okay to recognize that they exist in some places, or really in all places, to recognize they exist. And they don't always have to be a bad thing. I mean, there's a power dynamic between a parent and a child, right?
Yeah, and there should be.
It's a matter of what you do with it. That's what makes it bad.
Yeah, you get them everywhere, as you say. Not just a parent and a child, but the teachers and a child, doctor and patient, absolutely everywhere you go. Now, I mean, Luke, in your line of work, what sort of power dynamics are there? Are they typical?
Well, I guess then they're not typical to the rest of society, no, because when somebody's got a learning disability or mental illness, society has places a value judgment on them. So they not only have a power dynamic within the services that I work in, where like support workers and doctors kind of have a level of power over them because they can exert their intention over those people. They can give them medication, enforce restrictions on their lives that. I mean that they can't access the same kind of community stuff that we can, but there's also just a normal societal power dynamic where they're not. Society doesn't allow them to access the same communities by proxy, by kind of like that person's too crazy to come to because they're talking to ourselves and we're worried about what they're going to act like or do. So they won't be invited to come attend like clubs or like events and stuff like that, and also stuff like with people with learning disabilities. I think, and not to bring it to the atheist community immediately, but like things like the atheist community have gatekeeping in place for people who are less intelligent, because they think that in order to be an atheist, you have to be intelligent and to be able to understand all the concepts.
This is true.
So for the people that I work alongside and the people that I have kind of like a professional relationship with, there is power dynamics in all walks of their lives.
So, I mean, you mentioned things like the atheist community. You can, and you can extend that to say like the ACA, and you can see how there sometimes seems to be an abuse of power with people that they might have on from callers, or you might actually hear of things that happen behind the scenes as well. Brina, do you have much experience of these ones yourself?
Do you mean with the ACA specifically?
Or any big content creator within the atheist community?
Well, no one that I want to name. But I will say, I guess I will say the good and the, I guess, kind of maybe questionable. I have a few close friends that I've made that, are bigger creators in the atheist community. There have been a few that have been, I actually, a part of the reason I began to trust them so much is because they didn't just feed me a bunch of information from the start. They reassured me that what I was doing with my channel was good. And then as I became more knowledgeable through my own means, they kind of spoke a little bit more. And they had actually mentioned that the reason they wanted to be able to talk to me, but they were like, we just started talking and I didn't want to groom you, basically. And I had a lot more respect for them because of that, because, they were somebody that I spent, I was watching videos of them, a couple years ago, and, it's so bizarre, this, like, I guess, society that we live in now, where somebody could be like not famous, but they're like a big deal to you, because when you have all these engagements on YouTube, it's like, you could be a fan of somebody who only has 5,000 subscribers or less, really. So there's still this, like, that's not like large in like the YouTube sphere, but it can feel like such a big deal to you, So that's kind of, I was feeling a lot of that in the beginning. And then there was somebody else who I also, I nothing bad against them if they end up watching this. They're very sweet. But there was times where, I wanted to try to have a conversation about something, and I felt like I couldn't like bring it to my channel because I was really concerned about how it might impact them. And it was hard for me to recognize the biases that I could have because I have been talking to them privately. And because this person is a much larger creator than anyone I've ever spoken to before. So that kind of made it, difficult. Not a bad thing. It's just something that I kind of had to figure out within myself, and knowing when to set boundaries and trying to make sure that I can stay true to myself and not feel like I'm being silenced, even if it's not intentional. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I know I'm like kind of giving vague answers.
No,
but...
so part of a power dynamic. I mean, you mentioned something there that you can think about. There's an actual power dynamic, and there's also a perceived power dynamic as well. That
that's a good word for it. Yeah,
you can almost feel threatened or more powerful than someone else, even if that actual relationship isn't there. I suppose in the same way that you could think about like unrequited love and things like that as well.
Yeah.
You could think that someone is flirting with you and you're flirting back, and there's a good thing going on there, but actually it's completely one-sided. And sometimes you could think about that about a power dynamic. You can perceive them, whether it's because they've got so many subs and they have an air of might, you feel a bit threatened by them, or actually they are being genuinely threatening. So
right. And some of it does come down to the person that is perceiving the power dynamic, right? Like, I think it's also like, if I'm a fan of someone and we're in contact, I feel like it's also my responsibility not to be sitting there like hounding them on their Twitter, like in their messages, like always popping up, be like, hey, how are you today? What's going on? You want to talk? Like, because even they might not be doing anything wrong. Maybe the power dynamic still exists because I have perceived it that way because of my perception of them.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. And that could just be on me and my responsibility in choosing how I navigate it and my awareness of it. Because they are still a person. And I think that's important for all of us to remember, especially as creators, as we get into this field. And we are going to come in contact with people that we are fans of. And it's a different type of relationship that most of us probably haven't experienced.
Yeah, most definitely. So, I mean, Dave, was there anyone in mind or a particular situation in mind for tonight's discussion that you wanted to address?
No, not really. I've watched a lot of Brina's videos where she talks about power and the abuse of power, and I found it all very interesting.
Oh, most definitely. So,
I'm not an expert, by the way. Somebody in the chat said Brina's the expert here, and I just want to say, like, I'm not like putting my knowledge above anybody else's. I'm just somebody that cares, and I enjoy thinking about these issues because I feel like, been impacted them in the town that I grew up, and how certain things were normalized, and realizing how, abhorrent some of the things I've witnessed are, and I guess just wondering where the line gets to be drawn. How does it get that bad? And I think these conversations have to be had to prevent the worst of the worst, because when we normalize the little things and we belittle them, where does it go from there? And I think that's kind of where my passion and for this topic came from. But I'm not an expert. I'm just a person who likes to have these conversations and has opinions and has a camera.
A lot of experience could technically make someone an expert, at least at the experience.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go with that.
Okay, sounds good.
There is a question actually from Mark Caesar that says, do you think our personalities attract the same power dynamic around us because that is the way we feel comfortable and feel we deserve?
I'm thinking of I'm just thinking of that quote. That's we accept the love we think we deserve from that what book was that? I can't think of it right. Oh, Perks of Being a Wallflower. It just reminded me of that because I think it's a similar concept. Sorry, somebody else can speak. I wasn't trying to interrupt. Sorry.
Personally, I would say no, because I suppose to some extent it can. But if you want to be in a powerful position and to be wielding that power, you're going to look for opportunities where you don't have peers; you have people under you.
That's true.
It really depends on what you're looking for when it comes to wielding power.
But do you think maybe if you're someone who tends to be incredibly insecure, even though you don't want to be in a power dynamic where you feel lesser, because you're so insecure in yourself, you end up attracting people that want to
abuse that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to some extent, our personalities can attract specific types of power dynamics.
In that sense, yeah, I would say so.
I think. Come on, Brina, you're our guest.
Something I just want to say. I totally get where that's coming from, but my concern here, a little bit, is victim blaming, just a little bit, because it's. I guess like, is it? I think it's possible that when you have this sense of hollowness or lack of self-worth, that those people are more vulnerable to being abused. But I think we have to be careful in saying that they're attracting those people because it's not their fault that they're attracting those people.
No, agreed.
I
don't think there's blame
the other
there.
person. Oh, and I know that's not what anybody's saying, but I just think, that might be something that needs to be clarified, maybe with the person asking the question, and just, with the audience, to keep in mind that if you do feel like you're attracting those people, that's still not your fault that that's happening.
Yeah, that's true.
Somebody else is taking advantage.
I agree with that.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Luke?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to just bring up attachment styles and schemas, because they're formed when we're very young. So our attachment style is like kind of based on how we interact with our guardians when we're really young. That can affect the likeliness of us either becoming somebody who manipulates people in order to kind of have people in your life or something. You feel like you need to be able to manipulate people in that sense, or become someone who's more likely to become manipulated. And the part of that is the schema aspect, which is schemas are like our kind of unconscious understanding of how the world works. So if you grew up in a family where all the relationships you observed were very male dominated, where the male had all the power, maybe that your schema about how a relationship looks like that, and then you might be more accepting then of that a relationship that is like that in the future, not having had any kind of other role models or any other like kind of like social interactions that would kind of have changed that. So I think there are systems in which, like family systems, social systems, that cause people to be more likely to become victims in those situations. But I agree with Brina. It's we need to be really careful about like kind of saying, oh, okay, well, it's their fault, because it's not. And I think I've said on a few different things that we've had about, especially when we've talked about like offending stuff, it's always about reasons. So we can look at reasons, but it's not excuses.
Oh no, I mean it is very true.
Think,
as a child abuse survivor, for example, statistically I am more likely to experience being SA'd, which I have. So it's like there are statistics in place that do back up that certain things can make you more vulnerable. I just wanted to make sure that we're making that distinction, that it's never, our fault as survivors. Something that you said, Luke, though, did make me think about what it is that makes somebody who is manipulative versus the person that's vulnerable. What creates those behaviors of, somebody who's predatory, whether that be, sexually, romantically, just in their friendships, the way they treat people. I did have an experience with that. It's nothing that I can talk too much about, but, when I first got on YouTube, because of the controversial things I talked about, I attracted a cyberstalker, someone who pretended to be my friend and were scheming and doing horrible things and behind the scenes. And I have like PTSD from it. Like I already had PTSD, but like the amount of anxiety and stress I had after that and my trust issues, and I had to think about like, how does a person get to that point? And there's a part of me that has pity for them, because they're sick, like something's wrong. And that always like really breaks my heart a little bit, because people are responsible for their behaviors, but I do want to emphasize that there is a way to come back from that. But you have to take the matters into your own hands, and you have to take responsibility for why you're behaving that way, for your own trauma, and deal with it. Because once you start hurting other people, there are consequences that you can't come back from, and hurt people. If that makes sense.
A cycle of abuse. It's a cycle of abuse. Quite often people who have been hurt or abused in some way go on to hurt or abuse others.
In the same way as well. It's like it's usually reflective of their experience a lot of the time.
Yeah. Sorry, I got a little dark and serious there, but that's going to happen with me.
What are Thursday nights for? There is something that I think, just circling back a little bit, we quite often will explain a behavior and not excuse it, and there are quite often I have to explain to someone else who just because I can explain why someone behaves a certain way, I'm not excusing them from doing that. And just because it's the same on the other side, just because we can say why someone is more likely to be a target, more likely to be a victim, we're not saying that they were asking for it at the same time.
Right.
You're looking at the overall dynamic, and there are certain behaviors that set you up one way or another. And it's like Luke says as well. I mean, if you're in a particular family situation where it is a very sort of patriarchal type place, you expect that sort of power dynamic as you grow up, and you might actually struggle with equal rights and things like that. Hopefully you can get over yourself. But there will be people who struggle to see that the power, it should be different to what they expect. But these traits actually come with us when we're growing up. It's like things like racism as well. Any form of bigotry, it's generally a learned behavior from either your parents or your social group. So a lot of the different like negative qualities and positive qualities we see in people, they are there from such a young age, and they become hard to take over. They're either there because of that or because of trauma, aren't they, Luke?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
I was talking about another reason, like other than the family dynamic, is trauma.
Oh, trauma is important. Trauma. I think trauma is something that is extremely underrated in terms of like human behavior and the reasons people act in certain ways. I think that we all have trauma. We all have traumatic experiences that shape us, and we're not taught how to cope with it, and we're not taught how to heal it. And that means that it ends up becoming like kind of described as like maladaptive behaviors, so not or non-adaptive behaviors. You know, adaptive behaviors would be ones that help us to act in a pro-social way appropriately and stuff, and then maladaptive ones would be, you know, like stuff that is antisocial or like against what would be helpful for us, adaptive for us. A really good example is thinking about attachment is if somebody has experienced a lot of loss or a lot of rejection when they're younger, and that could be through negligence from their parents or through, you know, early childhood bereavement and sorry, I should trigger warning because I'm going to bring up things that are potentially traumatizing for people, so there may be things like that that I'm going to discuss. So, you know, those types of traumatic experiences, rejection and loss early in life, what you tend to see is people end up becoming quite boundaried in their relationships as they grow up, and end up actually trying to sabotage those relationships that they have, new relationships they have, in order to try and see if that person's going to stick around. And if that person doesn't stick around, it reinforces that, well, they were never going to stick around in the first place. They're going to reject me, kind of thing. Then that behavior carries on. Whereas actually what they should be doing is trying to find people who will stick around and engaging with them in a pro-social way. But they're not taught that. They're not shown that, you know, actually this is trauma that you're experiencing, and that's why you're engaging in this.
You might also find some of those people actually attempt to push people away before they have a chance to leave as well. So they're taking the power back in that situation.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the reason.
Someone.
Yeah.
You know, those quickly turn toxic. I mean, it's an example of a hurt person hurting people, and it doesn't excuse it. And it's sad because they're perpetuating more trauma and with what they're doing in those relationships. You know, a part of the problem, I have to say, as an American, at least, is we don't have accessible healthcare for everyone, and we're not promoting enough mental health advocacy for people to get the help they need. But also, when you have a culture that has normalized that, to where it's like we said before, how it's like expected, you're used to it. You almost become somebody who excuses it. You might even be somebody on the internet excusing it and victim blaming other people because you think this is just how it's supposed to be. And, you know, going off of trauma, a lot of these people, you know, and I can say this from personal experience, you know, through my adolescent and teen years and even earlier in my marriage, you're in a fight or flight response when you're behaving that way. And you have to learn the tools through therapy, how to get out of those responses without hurting people. Because when you're in a fight or flight response, when that becomes triggered, and it can be triggered by the most smallest, minuscule thing that the other person has no idea that they did this, or, you know, or not even that they did this, but that something happened that caused you to react that way, you can't think logically. You know, all you're thinking is run away, lash out, and that's going to hurt people. It's just, you know, it's how it is. And you just have to learn, you have to take responsibility for yourself eventually and learn the tools to make sure that you're not becoming somebody else's perpetrator.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I like that.
So there's been a point made in the chat that I just thought I'd bring up before we continue. So Mark actually brought up a point about the YouTube algorithm that we were talking about earlier, and I figure, seeing as we are talking about big YouTube creators as well tonight, it might be useful to interject this here. He says that Mr. Atheist was great at manipulating his audience to create a power bubble for himself. He used them to manipulate the algorithm and other things, and he was great at it. He follows that up by saying a simple way was asking his audience to dislike the streams multiple times to manipulate the algorithm. And that's one example as well. Now, I mean, in that front, they could also use their power to get people to like or dislike other people's streams as well. So if you've got enough power as a big YouTube creator, you can call someone out on what you perceive as bullshit and use your power there to actually make a video so disliked that it doesn't actually come up into anyone's feed. You can get almost an army of people around you to hate bomb, the comments section, if you so wish. Have you had any experience of this sort of thing going on?
Me?
Yes.
Or anyone?
No, you.
Me personally, no. Luckily, I have not really experienced that yet. Well, not from another YouTube creator. No.
Right.
On the topic of Mr. Atheist, though, one thing I will say about Jimmy is that although I do not like his character, I do not think he's a good person personally, I will say that he built his fan base with people that I think are good people. And because of that, there are certain things that Jimmy cannot get away with. So, his best move, which is what he's been doing, which is what he's learned to do because he realized responding is not helping him, is to ignore all of the people criticizing him so that his majority of his audience will stay in the dark. Because I don't know that I've ever seen Jimmy Snow, besides people that maybe this is my bias speaking, that I think probably kind of deserve it because the content that they're pushing is actually really harmful. And they should be getting criticized and getting, attention. I mean, I haven't watched or, absorbed Jimmy's content in a few years now. So I don't know for sure that he has never done this in a way that it was, abusive. But I don't think that he's attacking people that just criticize him, for example, and actually targeting them, at least not up front. That's not happening in front of our eyes. If he's doing it behind the scenes, I can't speak on that. But luckily, I think he has built a platform that he is accountable to, and that if he shows too much manipulation or gets a little too takes the mask off too far, then he's going to kill his career. So he can't do that. So I did just want to clarify that because I don't know that Jimmy Snow has actually weaponized his audience and sent a bunch of hate. Well, I mean, he's done that to Pastor McMurtry, or whatever his name was. I can't remember, but he's also notoriously homophobic and literally wants gay people killed. So right. I am biased in that sense where I'm like, I don't really care about that person. Yeah, sure. So, but I don't think he has been doing it to people just for criticizing his character and who he is. So,
I think what he may have done though is he's definitely taken a bit more of a backseat. He's never seems to be the host of The Line or anything like that anymore. I think he's probably just biding his time, just waiting a little bit of time so people, the news rollover of coverage online or whatever. But I do think what he's done in terms of how he's formatted his shows is not manipulative, but it is interesting, and it does show that
people don't see it. It's not,
because he's taken the format of a non-profit organization show and copied it verbatim, including the hosts, and made it a for-profit show.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same show on a different platform that's for profit. And to me,
And a lot of this stuff, yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting, my bad.
No, that was literally what was everything. So, yeah.
I was going to say a lot of the manipulation that you do see on screen, it is subtle. And a lot of people haven't noticed it until somebody calls attention to it and they realize that it's happening. Just as an example, my last video that I did on him, about a month ago, put a lot of work into it. So you guys should go check it out. But it was me responding to a video where he confesses that he was a former pickup artist. And the things in that video, it boggles my mind how he got away with all of the shit that he said. And the way that he was praised in the comments for it. And just an example of those small manipulation tactics. I mean, he's sitting here apparently acting like he's taking accountability for things that he's done when he was in the pickup artist community, but he's not actually confessing to what he's done. He's just kind of shitting on the pickup artist community that he was actually a part of for years. Like he separated himself from it. So he's not really taking accountability for anything. But also, let me promote my socks and let me drink from the Sometimes Show cup and let me ask you to join Patreon and let me ask you to subscribe and like my video. How the fuck is that taking accountability for anything? And that is a form of manipulation to me. It's like, what? Like, I'm sorry, that gets me heated. And I definitely get heated in that video about it because I found it very disgusting behavior.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Although, on that note, Luke's released a couple of T-shirts, and everyone should buy them.
I haven't announced that yet.
Yeah, well, it's out there now. It's out there. Everybody knows now.
Wait, is this serious? Have you actually released T-shirts?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to go look.
Yeah,
I love
really
it
cool.
when people release merch.
Yeah,
I don't think I'll ever do it, but I always enjoy supporting other creators that do. I have a lot of atheist T-shirts actually from atheist creators and stuff. So,
and I think that's a great thing that especially if you're able to do that, I think that is something that can come out of these power dynamics if they're done right. You get people supporting each other in a positive way, bringing positive things around, having positive conversations, and like you mentioned with the homophobe. Okay, maybe it was a negative behavior, but you're saying that actually you don't mind as much because of the fact that he was a homophobe. And do you know what? I get that. I'm not arguing that at all.
Well, I guess it's not just that he was a homophobe. It was that he actively wants us dead.
Yes.
You know, so, and I think that's where the darker part comes in, where, it's hard for me to have empathy for that, and I know that's probably hypocritical and a double standard. I acknowledge that, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I really care about him particularly.
No, I can understand that, but it shows that maybe that wasn't necessarily the best way to go about it, but it shows that with a big YouTube creator, they do have the power to do good as well. So it's not just that the power dynamic will always lead to negative things. And I do think that sometimes we are very guilty of looking at the bad things that happen in a power dynamic. God, what's wrong with my face? There are quite often good things that can come out of it too. There can be charity drives and fundraisers and all sorts like that. You see that quite often where people raise money for others. Now, sometimes that comes back and bites them in the face, and
so yeah, but there is a level of manipulation there as well, right? Because if you're in a powerful position with a fair amount of,
I was just about to say that manipulation can be a good thing. That's what looks. Yeah, go ahead, Luke. Sorry.
Well, yeah, but you can influence people to spend money on charities and stuff. But then, for me, it's also like a lot of people that do that would be able to donate a lot more and often don't. So for me, sometimes it's a facade. Sometimes it's a like, look at me, I'm supporting this charity. Someone like what's his name? Mark. Who plays Hulk in Avengers?
Mark Ruffalo.
Ruffalo, there we go. Mark Ruffalo. He's legit. He does a lot of stuff that is like, he uses his power for good, like the powerful position he's in. really humble. He's always amazed that he's around big stars and stuff. I don't know if you've seen the videos of him just being like shocked that he's standing next to like Chris
he
Evans.
gets really excited.
And he's amazing, and he's done a lot for I think California's droughts and stuff like that, trying to get water sorted in California and stuff, and he does a lot of pushing on the local governments and stuff to make more of an effort. But then there's other celebrities who might just be like, support this charity, but then when you look at how they're living and their finances and stuff and the way that they act, it's clearly just them trying to put on a face and be like, yeah, I'm a good person, when actually it's just like,
yeah, I mean, it's similar to what came up the other day when we were talking about how supermarkets and things like that. Oh, do you just want to donate, round up to the nearest 10 quid and donate to this charity?
Donate like hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, exactly. Really you're a £1 billion corporation with loads of profit, yet you want me to donate this extra tenner that actually I can't afford because I've spent it all on food for my kids. And you can, you're right there. There are certain celebrities that will do it to present themselves in a good light, but even still, they may inspire other people to be good as well. So to a certain degree, even though they may not be doing it for good reasons, if they inspire good behaviors from other people, is the net result an acceptable one?
So, interestingly enough, and I actually hadn't thought about this when I got on the stream, but the secret project I'm working on that I've mentioned and teased a little bit actually has to do with two celebrities.
Ooh.
And it is about a power dynamic. And initially, I can agree with you that if there's something that's happening out of it, then does it matter that they aren't genuine? But then what you see and what I have witnessed in a fandom is then when you see bad things start coming out about these people, then suddenly their performative activism is evidence that they're not really abusive. They're not hurting people behind the scenes. They can't be doing this. And the first video that I'll be doing actually focuses on certain charities that they've created and the way that they have been abused and most likely not actually benefiting the people that they're claiming that they are in the ways that they are claiming they are. So it's a very complicated thing because, with fandoms, it's like a niche and like people get crazy in these types of places. And it's like they refuse to see anything outside of, I mean, they tweeted gay rights once. So like they can't be like homophobic, right? I mean, so-and-so's ex was bisexual. So like they're not homophobic. And it's like, what are they doing behind the scenes? Who's supporting the charities that they're running? If it's Chick-fil-A, that might be a problem. And yes, that's a hit.
It's like those people who go, I can't be racist. One of my friends is black.
Yeah. And like I said, I think the biggest thing that I see with the idea, because they obviously have inspired good. They inspired good in me. I mean, a part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because I was a part of the fandom. I literally wrote fan fiction for them. So I was a total nerd about it. It's actually, I've actually heard you mention it before, Dave. It was, or not, was it Dave? It was The 100. I think some of you have watched the show. I feel like I've heard it mentioned before. So it has to do with a couple cast members on that show. And I was very much involved in that fandom. And things get toxic when things start coming out of the closet and people start trying to speak up. And then suddenly it's like, have they really actually inspired good? Because now you have these people harassing actual people because they've convinced themselves that what they're seeing on screen has to be it has to be reality. And it's like they can't dig themselves any deeper than that because they've attached themselves to they feel like they have an actual relationship and connection to somebody that they've never met. And it's dangerous. It can get dangerous pretty quickly, I think. Sorry to go on that spiel. I just found it interesting that got brought up because it really
it tied in well.
Yeah.
I actually think it ties in quite well to Autumn's video as well, about the way the atheist experience works and what it's trying to achieve versus what it should be trying to achieve. And just to bring it back to atheism, because this is about YouTube, and I think that this is probably going to come up later. But the way, like, if we're thinking about the atheist experience as a show, and we've had conversations about this quite a few times.
We are broken records after all.
We are broken records. I think we could probably approach it from a different angle, thinking about the power dynamic aspect of it. But like it's set up in order to be entertainment to then do activism behind the scenes, but then no one seems to know what activism they actually do, other than maybe some support in some blood drives. I think that's the confusing thing, right? Like the money they're earning money from this entertainment on the show, and then people don't seem to know where that money goes afterwards.
I think there's a certain amount of trying to keep creationism out of schools and stuff like that. But you're right, with a lot of atheist organizations. Well, yes, no, that's what I was going to say. With a lot of atheist organizations like that, you go, okay, you say you do this stuff, but like, where's the evidence of it? And I think I recently watched a video from Chesh that was talking about the Canadian atheists in that regard, and where the business address is, and it's all a PO box, and there's no evidence of any activism actually going on. Now, it'd be interesting to actually have the conversation with Randolph and actually say, so what actually is done with the people's membership fees? Because you say that someone can pay for a lifetime membership for like $1,500, or they can pay you monthly. There's also an application fee of this much, and so on and so forth. But what are you actually doing with this money? Much in the way, like going back to the ACA, because I don't want to veer from your point. You're saying, there's this call-in show that is. It is entertainment, and it's built on a power dynamic of you're going to call in, and if you're a theist, you're going to be told you're stupid and have the phone hung up on you. That's basically the entire show and every call. But people still call in, and they still make the money in that regard. And you're right, what are you actually doing? You're saying you're going to do something, but what are you doing? And I think more and more people, and this comes back to your point as well, Brina, is the fact that, well, people are questioning it more and more now. At the start, people were like, let's do this atheism, activism stuff. Let's be logical, rational people. And the more things go on, and the more you realize that they don't seem to adhere to their own rules and don't stick to what they say they're going to do, at least in a massively public way, the more you doubt that this is going on, and it can have an inverse effect. It can create a divide, and it can create people who are actively against them, even though on paper you've got the same ideals.
Yeah. Right. And it also creates, it's also difficult when somebody does have such a large fan base behind them, because then it gets really toxic, because then not only are we questioning, who you are and what you represent, but then you have people that are excusing really awful things. And then it's like you have this toxic environment forming where you have people who are just excusing things that like we would be holding Christians, over the fire for, like in a metaphorical sense. And that doesn't make sense to me. Something that I also want to point out too is, unfortunately, you see a lot of these, you've seen it a lot in feminist spaces, for example, where men might portray themselves as a feminist and get into these circles, and then they sleep with as many people as they can.
That's because we're all dicks.
Which is like, you can do that legally, like that's fine. You might be a shitty person for doing that though. But in the same sense with the atheist community, there does seem to be things, and there's certain things I can't talk about, but I personally know this from the friendships that I've made. It's sometimes shocking to hear stuff that's going on behind the scenes, because you're just like, how I can't comprehend how somebody is able to switch roles so easily and fluidly and pretend to be something on screen when they're hurting people behind the scenes. I don't know how to, rationalize that in my head, But I do think that it comes down to maybe people that have predatory behaviors. And when I say predatory, I don't mean just like they're, offenders or anything like that. I just mean predatory as in seeking out those power imbalances and being in control and manipulating people and being able to, like we spoke about earlier, keeping people out of communities and getting what they want or getting you to do something you don't want to do. I think these types of spaces, and especially the atheist space, because the idea of intelligence is so, ramped up here, where a lot of people kind of have this air like they're better than other people because they're a skeptic and they're so intelligent. And I think that attracts a lot of these personalities that could ultimately use their platform to hurt people because they like being in control. They like feeling superior. And you have a lot of superiority in the atheist community is glorified. And I think that's naturally going to attract people that enjoy having power over other people. And that's when you get into those dangerous dynamics.
How many times have you heard someone go on about how atheists, we're all atheists here, but there is a pattern of behavior we do see online where someone claims that, atheists are smarter, atheists are more rational, atheists are more moral. It's all, oh, look at us, we're all skeptics. And we're aesthetically skeptic more often than not, rather than actually being skeptical. And one of the biggest things that is promoted is free thought. Yet, if you dare have something against the general consensus of atheists, you get othered into being a theist. I'm sorry, I thought we were free thinkers. Oh no, just in label. Okay, it's just an aesthetic free thinkers. Yeah. Okay.
There's actually a couple of things I've seen. Excuse me, coming out of atheist. Basically, there was a show that was on every Sunday with Ethan and Jenna Belk, which was discussing, mental health issues. And I thought that was brilliant. And that kind of it was a different take on it. And I thought that is what we need. That's the important stuff that we need in this online space. We need people talking about mental health in people with who are atheists, especially in America, because, a lot of and I didn't know this, but a lot of the therapy that you can get is predominantly religious based, which is shocking to me, because there's basically none of that in the UK. It's all pretty much secular therapy like CBT and stuff. So yeah.
Well, you think about Alcoholics Anonymous, though. I mean, the whole 12 Steps program, Find the Power and all of that. There is sort of stuff like that going on. But sorry to interrupt. I did want to just...
No, that's fine. And then the other one is actually, and I know Shannon's in the chat, so I'm not just saying this to... I was going to say this anyway before I knew Shannon was in the chat. But Shannon's video was yesterday. My mind's gone... Yeah, it was yesterday. About, her experience of bereavement and stuff. That was exactly what the community needs. People need to be open and honest about their experiences with these things. It really upset me, actually, watching it. It was a great stream. But it upset me that it took such a tragedy and someone experiencing such trauma to have that happen. To have that conversation. Someone who's already really big in the community, to experience that, for there to be a conversation about it started. And I think you guys know that when I started doing YouTube and stuff, that was always what I was talking about with bereavement and community and stuff like that. That's what I'm about, and that's what I see as lacking. And I find that it does seem to be that the shows that are on at the moment are purely there for entertainment purposes, and there's that sense of power, and the caller is put into a Brina, I think you've discussed this about the caller not being in a position where they can mute and they can hang up and stuff, and that leads to the conversation being entirely one-sided, and you end up thinking that whoever's having that discussion is a winner, regardless of the fact of whether their argument was good or not, because they can mute them and explain their point, and the other person doesn't have the opportunity to do that because they're not in a position where they can do the same thing. And I think it's just it has helped people to a certain extent with deconstruction and stuff like that, but I think it's also fostered this kind of like interrupting, talking down on people approach to conversations with other people, and I think it really is. It does frustrate me that that's something that happens.
And beyond just the talking down to other people, where's the contribution to the atheist community? Where is the help that we need in the aftermath of deconstruction?
No such thing as an atheist community.
Oh, God.
Sorry. We'll bring out all the memes for you, Brina. We'll bring them all out.
But there's a lot of things, that we struggle with as atheists after we deconstruct. And I don't think that fellow atheists see enough of that. And I don't think that theists see enough of that. Because a lot of people, we're used to getting misconstrued and misrepresented. And a lot of people think that like will be the meme. We just want to be atheists because we want to be sinners, and we're big bad people, and we just enjoy just going out here and sinning, whatever that means. And it's like, for a lot of us, it's like, I don't know. I don't really think that I wanted to believe that one day I'm not going to exist. That wasn't really a happy feeling. That doesn't make me feel good. So, and I think we need to have more conversations around that, and also around losing other people. Because it's like, you think that we like, if I could take the religion out of it, which I did at some point, and just be spiritual and just believe in the afterlife, and think that there's a place outside of Earth where I get to be with my loved ones, and I get to continue living and growing and maturing and being the best person that I could be, and that there was this other life
Science
out
doesn't
there.
support that.
Right. Well, then I would get behind that. But the thing is, and the thing that hurts us, as somebody who is an atheist, and how I see it, is like that belief hurts people, because then we're not taking all the opportunities to grow and better ourselves in this life that we need to. And of course, with the dynamic, again, that we were talking about with the atheist community, there's also the issue of, are we actually bettering ourselves and being the best person that we should be when we're talking down to people? And real quick, because Luke did mention Christian therapy in American societies, I just kind of want to plug seculartherapy.org. It's a place that you can go to find a secular therapist in your area. So if anyone's thinking about that, I would recommend going to, again, seculartherapy.org to find a secular therapist.
You know you owe Joe £5 now for plugging, right?
Shit, we can make money from this.
I don't own this website. Hold on. I shouldn't have to pay anything. You're gonna have to send that bill to seculartherapy.org. You can explain it to them. I mean, that's your call.
Actually, there is. We were contacted by someone a little while ago, and I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. So it's selected the wrong link. It's on our links page, but it is because we mentioned like the 12 steps program for the AA and stuff like that. There is rehab that you can get that doesn't have the whole power thing. Now they do have on there that they have some sort of alternative medicine type thing. And I actually questioned them on this, and I was like, why have you got the sort of the needle one, acupuncture, that's it. Why have you got acupuncture on there when it's shown that it doesn't actually really have any benefit? And they've said, we've tried a number of different therapies, and the fact that some people have enough belief in this working for it to be a placebo to help them get over themselves, we do have certain things in there that, whilst we know don't necessarily work, it helps the person, and then we can help them alter their mind so it actually works. And they gave such a good answer. I was like, yeah, good. I'm glad you answered like that. Yeah. So I put them on our site.
Awesome. I mean, I've had conversations about that too. I think that, at least some, what was the word that you used? I just blanked. The forms of like therapy, or forms of like, what is it called? Alternative medicine. They can be beneficial. Maybe not the ways that are being promoted, but they can be beneficial, and they can help people. And in some ways, it might have to do with like grounding yourself and your emotions. Some people have there's certain things like, just for example, like prayer beads, for example, when somebody's rolling beads in their hands and they're praying, that might not, even if I don't believe that there is actually a deity out there listening, holding beads in your hand, it's actually a form of grounding therapy. Even like in my PTSD trauma therapy, I have like a stone that I hold in my hand when I'm trying to ground myself and focus on how it feels and center my emotions, and be able to it's kind of like a form of meditation a little bit.
Just gonna say
so there's a lot of benefits to stuff like that, that I think get overlooked by people who just kind of want to feel superior and can't admit when they are actually shown evidence that, hey, maybe you don't agree with this part, but there are benefits that you might not have considered.
Well, there's actually a number of theists that will say that prayer is actually supposed to be like a form of meditation. It's supposed to be self-reflective. It's supposed to be grounding.
Mm-hmm.
It's not supposed to be asking God to do things for you, because at the end of the day, they don't see it working that way. God's got his plan. You asking him to do something isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. What prayer is supposed to be about is reflecting on yourself and being grateful for what you have. So, I mean, that ties in. And I do think that prayer can be a form of meditation if done right, and meditation can help a number of people. There are plenty of studies to actually support things like meditation as well. It's one of the alternative therapies that is good and does work, with a lot of evidence to support it.
Wonder if that's like acupuncture, because that's where you have like needles in your skin,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because it just kind of reminded me of another tool that I have in my toolbox is holding an ice cube in the palm of my hand when I'm having a fight or flight response. The stinging brings me back to reality. So I wonder if the stinging of if they can feel needles, I wonder if that has like that kind of grounding effect.
I've actually had acupuncture a number of
curiosity.
times. It was one of the
Really?
things that
Okay, it took me a minute to register.
Yeah.
Register that. Okay. How was it? I never had acupuncture. Now I'm curious.
The first time I had it was when I was trying to give up smoking, and it didn't help with that whatsoever. But I did like the experience, right? Because they get it right in a nerve, and they would get like a needle there, and the needle would go in there, and then I wouldn't be able to move my entire arm from that. And I was just like, oh wow, this is amazing. This is like they're finding some way to completely paralyze me with having a few needles. And then I got the experience of actually lying there relaxing and thinking, and it was like it wasn't really the needles doing anything, but I enjoyed the overall experience. But then when I had issues with my elbow,
you're kind of selling me on acupuncture right now. Like I'm ready to go out and get it.
Yeah, but it doesn't actually do anything. It's just that it was that part of the experience. It was like, it was interesting. It was weird. It was, oh my God, I can't move. Okay, I really can't move. And now I'm here.
ADHD,
Yeah.
I feel like I can see how that could have an impact on like being able to suddenly like sit still, and you're like, wow, I haven't sit still since I've like been out of the womb. Like this is new to me.
Yeah. But then I had another experience with it later. So I had 3 or 4 sessions, I think, in that period. But then I also had it as part of an injury, and they were putting just a couple of needles into the localized zone, and it was just like, this isn't really doing anything at all. It didn't help me heal quicker. It didn't do anything. And so for an injury, because they didn't do the whole body or anything like that, there was like no benefit whatsoever. There wasn't even the whole, oh my God, I'm paralyzed. This is weird, man. And I think, do you know what? Life is about experiences. And if you can get a whole body one, go for like some proper like Chinese acupuncture, and take some of their weird Chinese medicine home with you as well, and take a lot of it. Why not?
I really like the, I don't know if it's, I'm not sure if it's like Chinese or Japanese, but I really enjoy the, what are they called? The stones where they like scrape them. I've had that done before. I really enjoy that. I don't know what it's called. Gosha, I think. There's body gosha. I have like a face gosha at home, and it's just like a crystal, but it's shaped certain ways, and you like can massage your face with it. And some people obviously have the belief that crystals have healing powers. I'm not in that camp. But to me, it's like relaxing. It's like, because I can't really sit still. So it's hard for me to meditate. So to me, I kind of use it to help meditate, but also it actually does. I mean, you get blood flow to your face and stuff. The cooling of the stone is going to help reduce swelling. So there's certain aspects that you might not have thought of, when you become a skeptic or atheist, because you see so much of the, supernatural side of things that are being pushed, and not so much of
the other side,
what's actually happening. Yeah.
And then we use our power to turn people off things that actually there could be benefits to, even if it's not the benefits that are being promoted.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do have some thoughts, but I wanted to let other people talk first. I was just going to say
Don't do it. It's a trap.
bringing this to
these two down here have been quiet.
Yeah. That's why I'm gonna spark them up a little bit right now. Bringing this to philosophy.
Do you think?
I just decide before we get to philosophy that I think a lot of people tend to forget that a placebo effect is still a measurable effect, right? That seems like a trivial point, but it does do something, right? It is not something that is directly caused by the thing itself, but rather by how you react to the thing and what you think it does, but it's still a measurable effect. And I think this is especially relevant in mental health, because when it comes to some physical disorder, right, if you think that it's working and you feel better, but the disorder is still there, right, if you still have the issue in your body, then you're not actually fixing things, and that's why it becomes dangerous, right? Because if the only thing that is being applied is the placebo, then you're not actually going to fix things, but you're just going to feel better. But in mental health, feeling better is the whole game, right? Pretty much, like sometimes at least. Right? So if you feel this in distress mentally, and then you find something that helps you feel better, no matter what that is, to some extent, it doesn't really matter, because the goal of the therapy and the goal of the thing that you're trying to find in order to fix your mental distress is to help you feel better. So if you get to that point, I at least tend to think that it doesn't really matter what it is that you find. It helps you. If it helps you, that's completely fine. And of course, that doesn't mean that there are not going to be standardized things that are going to help a majority of people, right, that are measurable and that are more effective in general than other things. But if you find something that works for you and works great for you, even though there's no sort of backing or study done on this, I think it's perfectly fine to just keep doing it.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to my philosophical point that I want you guys to expand on. Because I guess, when we're thinking about philosophies of truth and stuff like that, obviously thinking about the way that reality works, and the fact that acupuncture might have actually no effect on something, but then there's if we're thinking about pragmatic aspects of truth, where it's it. You see where I'm going with this? Now I don't know what I'm talking about, so someone take over from where I'm at. That's not Joe.
I just say real quick, I'm gonna be right back. Okay, I'm just gonna go.
No worries.
Real quick. I didn't want to just disappear.
I guess you could argue that it's not necessarily true that something like acupuncture cures you of something. But like Philip says, if it's a placebo effect and it works, as long as it's not stopping you from abandoning proper treatment, then you could say, well, it's true to the extent that it does help you. Just not true to the extent that it can cure cancer or stop smoking. Although, if the placebo effect stops the craving, then it can help with, stopping you smoking. But it's not, it's not a guaranteed scientific effect, so to speak.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that Shannon had a very good point, and I agree with that, in the sense that if whatever, even in mental health, right, if what you're doing is actually going to discourage you from seeking out something that is actually going to fix the underlying, issues, so that you're not going to, just cope with the thing, but it prevents you from actually finding a permanent solution, so to speak, then I would say that is a negative aspect to it.
And there can be.
That highly, it depends, I guess, on what is type of thing that you're suffering from. I guess.
And the severity of it as well, because if it's
Yeah.
like something, if it's like a relatively mild kind of like not even mental illness, just a mild mental health concern, that's something that doesn't affect you too much in your life, but you want to address, and there's something that is kind of something placebo that helps you get back to your baseline, because you're literally just like a placebo down from your baseline, that's okay. But if then you don't go and seek mental health when it gets worse, and you just use this alternative strategy, then that's when it will become a problem. And I guess that when people are debunking alternative medicines and stuff, that's the kind of approach that they're taking from it, is that that it potentially could cause people to rely on that when actually things get worse.
Yeah.
If people are like having I don't know, Herbalife or something like that, and they're thinking, oh, I haven't had a cold in ages and stuff like that, and then they get really sick, like they get like some sort of like chronic illness or something, and then they're like, well, I'm on Herbalife, so I don't need to go get medication or something. Then that's really problematic, and it works the same in mental health. So I think it's kind of
Balance.
It's balance, and it's kind of understanding that you're doing it for a placebo effect, or like even if you're doing it for Joe, if you get relaxed when you go get acupuncture, and it's the only time that your ADHD feels under control, and you are aware that it doesn't work in that sense, use that as a strategy, right? But then if your ADHD is affecting your mental health to the point where you're becoming like depressed, or you think you might even be going manic, yeah, that's when you need to seek more kind of conventional like kind of therapies and stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think that it is the sort of point that everyone's saying, and like Shannon brought up, is the fact that there are, if these alternative medicines that don't actually work to be a cure are preventing you from finding an actual cure, then yes, there is a problem there. But if they're helping you, I mean, if there is something that can help you snap out of a frenzy that you might be in, shall we say, and then move forward, and maybe with some CBTs or something like that, but first break your pattern, then, and it happens to be an alternative medicine that doesn't actually work, but it's worked for this instance, there are benefits that you can have to it. Now, I'm very against like alternative medicines and things like that. I really am, especially things like homeopathy. I mean, I don't really want to get onto that one because I'll probably rant for far too long.
With that, please.
But I think that there are certain, as you mentioned, there's certain strategies and things like that we can use to help us break certain patterns. What you say actually was, I remember once when I was a kid, my dad was a bit drunk, and he was getting a bit angry, and I made him just stand on two drains. I don't know if you remember the two drains game, but he'd never played it, and I'd broke him so out of what was going on in his head. He just started having a laugh, and it became a thing where if ever I was out with him and he started getting angry, I'd just told him to go stand on two drains for 30 seconds. Now, obviously, standing on two drains has no real effect in this regard, but it's just something that was enough to snap him out of something. Now, he is definitely someone who should have sought more help than me telling him to stand on two drains. But
how does one stand on two drains? I need this question answered because I feel like I'm not like where are the two drains at? So
where
I mean, do you find these drains?
When you're walking along the street, right? There's like sometimes you've just got like one drain cover. Sometimes there's like a double drain cover. That's the two drains, and sometimes you've got a triple drain cover. And standing on two drains, like walking over it, was good luck, right? And
interesting.
And standing on three was bad luck, and the only way to get rid of the bad luck was by three, was then quickly standing on one drain, right?
That's all it was. Southern UK thing.
I mean, we all have those different stories that we hear, and I've never heard this.
Don't stand on three drains in South UK. Yeah.
It's completely dumb. It's completely ridiculous. It's one of those things, though. I noticed myself. Sometimes even now, I unconsciously move out of the way of 3 Janes from having played this game when I was a kid, and I just go, why? And sometimes I say, no, I'm going to prove I don't get any bad luck and go back and walk over the 3 Janes just to prove to myself that nothing bad is actually going to happen.
It's like avoiding stepping on cracks in the sidewalk.
Yes, yeah, that sort of
what
thing.
is it? You step on a crack, you break your mama's back.
My mum told me that if I stepped on a crack, a bear would come out of the pavement and eat me. It was totally true. I was terrified.
I'm pretty sure that's
what
insulting
kind of
Paul
urban
Profit.
legend is that? Where does that come from?
Is that child abuse?
A bear's gonna come out and eat you.
Yeah.
I actually have I have a huge fear of bears, so that would have traumatized me.
I wouldn't call that phobia. That's justified. You should be afraid of bears.
Exactly.
not
That's
cracks.
what I tried telling people. I am like, it's normal to be afraid of bears. I don't understand when people see a bear and they go up and they try taking a picture of it. I'm like, I'm the smart person. I avoid those situations. Sorry, not to get on that, but could I bring this back to power dynamics a little bit, but segue with this topic? Because
Bears have all the power.
I forgot that's what we were supposed to be discussing. I mean, yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay. I have a segue for what we were talking about here. I was thinking about, the alternative medicine and, what we were talking about with, well, it can harm because then you're not seeking out actual treatment. And I 100% agree with that. I think the problem I see with the atheist community is because of that superiority complex that many atheists kind of exhibit, certain symptoms of with the way that they talk down to people. It's like, that's kind of the common argument that I hear. And it's going to be the common argument that other people that seek these medicines also hear. And I understand all of the whole, I totally get my concern being, especially living in America. I'm like, to me, it's like, this is all a segue into being anti-vax. You're thinking alternative medicine here, a little alternative medicine there. And then suddenly you're not getting your vaccinations and you're, promoting really dangerous stuff. And I completely agree with that. But I think as atheists, we have to kind of pull back that skeptical mindset for a minute. And I think we've done a good job on this stream doing that. I think you should be able to have both sides of the conversation. And it shouldn't just be shutting people down and saying, this is completely, there's no benefits to this. And actually maybe going into thinking about, why is it that somebody feels good when they do this? And maybe it's okay that they keep doing this. But maybe we can do that and also promote things that, may help them in the long term. But a lot of the little things that people do with alternative medicine, like we have spoken about, they might not be curing what's going on or really helping them maybe fully manage it to the best of their extent, but they could be tools that can assist along with maybe going to a doctor and getting on medication. And I think we do need to have those types of conversations, and I'm glad that we're doing that here.
Yeah. I think that why is so important. I don't know if it's the same in America, but the black community in the UK has a bit more kind of a health skepticism.
Not just the UK.
The reason for that, not just the UK, in America as well. Yeah. So, and I think probably elsewhere in the world as well. And the reason for that is because of vaccine trials, especially around the vaccine. And I don't blame them. Because vaccine trials have happened in Africa and the Caribbean where they're not quite fit for purpose yet, and they have adverse reactions. And the reason they're doing it is because they're poorer countries, and they can kind of basically say you can have this vaccine for free. The likeliness of a woman going into pregnancy dying is much higher for black women in the UK. I don't know what the stats are for in the States, but it's much higher for black women in the UK, despite the fact that we have a national health service. And there really shouldn't be any difference.
Because the bias is still there.
So the bias is still there. Health racism is a real issue, and the black community do not trust. Well, large parts of the black community do not trust the health system, and then you hear people calling anti-vaxxers as a broad statement crazy and stupid and stuff like that, and I don't agree with anti-vaxxers at all. I don't think that they're right. I think that they, ought to be.
Hang on a minute. I think there was a knock at the door.
Okay, I'll wait for you, Dave.
We'll wait. Let us know who's there. Tell them we say hi.
I do think that we need to be challenging people on this stuff, but I don't think we need to be mocking or degrading people on this stuff, because there are historical and justified reasons that people have these thoughts. Like, if we're thinking about, people who have children who have learning disabilities, yeah. Mm-hmm. I know quite a few, because I work with people with learning disabilities. I know quite a few people, parents, who are quite severely anti-vax, because they've seen this research, and it's obviously debunked research, but they've seen this research that shows that vaccines cause learning disabilities or autism in children, right? And their child had vaccines, and around that age, they also developed the first signs of autism or learning disabilities. So there's a pattern there. It just so happens that children get vaccines shortly before they start to develop their social skills, and that's the first sign somebody has learning disabilities or autism. So they see a pattern that is kind of a coincidental pattern, which is, I don't blame them for seeing it, because people are very protective of their children. Now there's a vaccine that people are expected to take, and it's socially acceptable to take, and they don't want to do it because they're worried that it's going to either worsen their child, who is maybe an adult now, condition, or cause it in them or something like that. And it's a genuine concern, and I don't blame them. They have busy lives, and they probably don't have the time to research everything that everyone else has time to research about the history of where that myth came from and the political reasons that it was generated. So we need to put effort into educating them in that sense and helping them understand why it's important that they take the vaccine, rather than belittling them and degrading them, which will push them further away, which is why we get massive marches of people who are against it.
And again, you get this power dynamic happening.
Way to bring it back.
Yeah, I'm still trying to think how I can actually tie it in.
Well, I think it does.
No, it does.
I mean, they're everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah, of course they are.
We're good.
There is a power dynamic, and actually within the anti-vax community, there is a power dynamic. You have people that are using power. So you've got what's his name, David Wolf, right, who is like a king anti-vaxxer, who was basically just a salesman on late night television, and he used his sales skills to start getting people to buy his personal products that are better than vaccines. Buy my vitamins, buy my blender, buy this, buy that, and he's created additional mistrust. Now, it's hard to know if he's actually doing it for genuine concerns or if he's just doing it for monetary concerns, and that's always an issue when someone turns something into more than free speech. He's turned it into a product. He's commoditized the whole anti-vax movement, and it's not just him. He's just one of the bigger ones that was doing it.
Well, there was the guy that was running for mayor and spouting loads of anti-COVID stuff because he thought it'd get him the mayorship. I can't remember. He was an idiot actor that was also racist. I can't remember his name, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, it does happen. But there's also, I think that within if we're talking about anti-vaxxers, the power dynamic is as well. That those individuals have been we I don't know how much, Brina, you know about UK politics over the past 6 years, but it's been incredibly turbulent. So there was a whole we've left the European Union. The whole campaign around that was fear based. So people were being told to be afraid of immigrants and EU bureaucracy. We don't have our control of our borders. We don't have control of our laws. We don't have control of our sovereignty. people are going to come over and take our jobs. There's going to be gangs forming because of immigrants and stuff like that. Lots of fear-mongering stuff, right? Which led to us leaving. And when we left, or when we're in the process of leaving, there was lots of fear-mongering about, how the EU is kind of trying to sabotage it, make us screw us over, cause us to not have any money or any food and stuff, because they're basically putting stuff in place to prevent us, to basically punish us, right? So even further, kind of being told to be scared and fearful of another group of people. When COVID happened, we were told to be fearful of COVID and fearful of going outside and seeing our families and stuff like that. And I think that tipped people from pretty much a decade of being told to be scared and being told to be afraid of these groups, and then told to isolate and be afraid of seeing our families. I think that's why people have had such a strong reaction in the UK against it, that they feel powerless and they feel like they need to take back power. They're doing that by saying, I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm not going to get a vaccine, I'm going to walk the streets when I want. And I think that that's a big part of it. I think that this is where the issue, this is where power dynamics can go absolutely, completely, terribly wrong. If you're abusing your power in a way to kind of get, in a sense, votes and stuff, that can have a massive backlash effect when something actually that you want to enforce happens, because it's your power might just collapse at some point when it gets too much for the people that you're exerting it over. And I don't know if British kind of people here.
I guess I'm just thinking about I'm actually thinking about my own actions and my own behavior, because I think it's easy for us to all fall into this narrative where I feel angry sometimes. I feel angry that people are putting other people's lives at risk. And in that, there is a sense of, I guess, empowerment and feeling like I am right, and in my view, knowing that I'm right, and the way that I choose to engage, even if it's just on Twitter, with people who are anti-vax. And, when you brought up, the issues with Black culture and the way that they have been, and other marginalized groups have been abused when it comes to these studies, as well as the fact that the effects impacted on people that are assigned female at birth are also completely underrepresented in a lot of these studies. There are very real reasons to be skeptical and to be afraid. And I get kind of reminded me of the issue that happened recently with Nicki Minaj, which, she said some stupid shit, but maybe it would be better to address these arguments not in a mocking manner, but in a way where you can say, I understand why you're scared. Because I think then there is this, again, I guess, power imbalance, because you're not acknowledging your privilege if you're a white person like me, and recognizing the history that they have, their ancestors have experienced, and their distrust that they're going to have for things like this and where it's coming from. And if you can't acknowledge that, you're not going to get through to them.
Mocking won't get through to people either, will it?
Right. No.
I think that's the same thing in the atheist community. People who have deconstructed from their atheism have done it because of, various reasons and stuff. But I guarantee you that mocking probably wasn't one of them. I mean, it may have been for a few people, but I think that, largely it's stuff that they had some doubt anyway, and then there was stuff that reinforced that, and then they went and explored content online or whatever. But if somebody's directly engaging with you, if you're going into it as a debate, you're automatically setting yourself up to fail, to change everyone's mind anyway, because you're just trying to win that conversation rather than
you've set up a fight, essentially, a verbal
exactly.
fight. That's all it is.
A debate is a verbal fight, right? But then, the second thing is, if you're, using belittling and degrading language, like you have a mental illness, or you're stupid, or you're childlike, you have an imaginary friend, you're also not seeing the reasons that they truly are engaged in that kind of belief system, which is usually to do with comfort, community, and support, right? Those things, yeah.
That's my
That's what I think, anyway.
To play devil's advocate a little bit, I just want to reiterate, because I think sometimes when we have these conversations, people like to make things black and white, and they're not.
Yeah.
It's okay that we mock people. Like, you're not a bad person for mocking people. We all do it. There are things of human nature, and sometimes while they might not have a greater impact overall, it's human nature. It's how we respond. It's how we emotionally interact with people. But I think having these conversations to bring awareness to knowing, is it worth maybe tweeting what you were going to tweet? Is it, making sure that you're not overstepping, making sure that you're not causing more harm and than good, especially because when you go outside of Twitter and when you start having people who are actually trying to have these debates, it's like, what is obviously you can't focus on the person you're debating because as you said, it is a fight. But what is it that you want to leave the audience with? The audience of your opponent. What do you want them to leave with? Not your fans, not the people that already agree with you, and go about it in that way. And I think mocking sometimes can hold us back when that's like one of the only tools in our toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes highlighting an absurdity can be useful. But you don't necessarily have to do it in an overly condescending way. And don't get me wrong, I understand what you're saying. We can have a joke amongst each other, and especially
we mock the memes, right? I mean,
of course, we do. And do you know what? As friends, I expect us all to mock each other as well. Sometimes genuinely, and but sometimes genuinely, and sometimes not. Like sometimes just because we're winding each other up, because that's what we do. Because that's, at least in UK culture, that's how you show you're friends. You're really horrible to the people that you love. But
that doesn't go over well here, but I feel like I would fit in more.
Shut up, Brina.
There, honestly. Because here I'm just a bitch.
But and I think that mocking can actually have a place as well. Say if there was something where I was about to do something really stupid. If someone who I had a good rapport with already, that I trusted, said something that might be a bit mocking or condescending because they needed to get me to stop doing it quickly, it would actually give me pause for thought, right? I would take a step back and go, why have you actually said that? And then hopefully have a good conversation. And I'm saying this in a situation where that was the only thing that they could do to sort of because that was the quick thing that cuts through the fraff. But if you think about a random person on the internet that you probably haven't had many, if any, conversations with, you are not going to respond well to being mocked, and they are not going to respond well to you if you mock them in general. I'm sure there are outliers, or there might be people, as you mentioned earlier, Luke, that were already doubting their position or already thinking something was a bit silly, and finding that other people thought these beliefs were silly too. Yeah. Oh wow, there's other people there that think the same as me, so let's go along with that. But in general, like if you're mocking someone or someone is mocking you, you're going to be turned off to them. And we've even had we were having streams at one point where we were having conversations about how to have good conversations, and someone came on and was condescending and patronizing, basically just not listening to the whole thing. And it was like, well, you realize what you've done. You've just turned off the entire audience to what you're saying. You might actually have a good point, but right now no one is going to listen to you because we're doing a stream on how to have more effective conversations, and you've just demonstrated the behaviors that we've said don't do.
That's exactly what happened with. Do you remember when I had that issue with Sarah Salviander? She'd done a whole podcast like a week before about how theists and atheists should communicate better, and she's a theist. She put up a tweet saying atheists are irrational or something, or it's not rational to not believe in God or something. And then I was like, you're saying that you want to have better conversations, but then you're just like basically just telling us all that we're irrational and like not expanding on it.
That's a good example of how we hurt Christians doing that. Sorry to interrupt, but go ahead.
No,
I mean,
yeah, and then
yeah.
I was just I did a stream about it because I was mad.
I was just thinking, because I mean, I've definitely said things, I know other people have, where we're like, it's not rational to believe in God. And like the feeling that I got in my like stomach when you said it's not rational to not believe in God was immediate. Like I literally felt like myself clench up. Like, are you serious?
Yeah,
But then I'm like,
It's the same
from that
thing, isn't it?
perspective, they're gonna feel the same way.
Yeah,
And I think, like, to be honest, I think that mockery, as many of you pointed out, is fine, right? There's nothing explicitly, I guess, immoral about it. It's a tool, right? But I think the key is understanding what it does and being honest with yourself why you're doing it, right? Because if you're mocking people and you're selling this idea that you're doing it because you're rational and you want just to convince other people to believe what is rational and stuff like that, then you probably are not being honest with others and you're not being honest with yourself to some extent. Because I do think that, as many pointed out, mockery is not the best tool to convince other people that of your point, essentially, right? It's not the best tool to engage in conversations. It can have a place sometimes, but in general, it's not a good tool. But I think it's also fine to just admit that sometimes what you want to do is just unload frustration sometimes and be like, just speak your mind and show what you're really thinking without filters, without trying to be sort of in a conversational setting in a way. So
Yeah.
as long as you're aware of why you're doing it, I think, and are being honest with others and with yourself about why you're doing and engaging in the way you do, then I think it's fine. But I hate it when I see people that constantly mock people and then sell it as if that's the way to convince other people of what they're saying, and trying to change other people's minds, because that's not the best way to do it. I think that's pretty clear.
Right. Yeah. I mean, mocking a lot of times comes from anger, and anger is a valid emotion.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it can be justified. And it's okay if mocking is a tool in your toolbox, as you said, but like, I can't be the only tool. And I think you have to recognize where that's coming from. And it's okay to be like, this is human nature. It is justified. I'm angry. I have a right to express myself. Of course. But I think we also have to have a space where we make sure, like, because at some point, I think it can, just like if somebody's angry all the time and lashing out at people, if all you do is mock, then there's a problem there, because you're not, for one, you're probably causing more harm. And also, is it getting to a point where you're hurting people? Like, what is your end goal here? Because, anger can be used in a way that is going to impact change, but it can also be used in a way that is just breeding more anger and just continuing a cycle that's never going to end.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fine. Like, it happens to me as well on Twitter, right? I see a tweet from like that makes me angry, right? I retweet it and I express my anger sometimes, and
right, yeah,
like that's fine, right? And there is also, I guess, a power dynamic here, because I expect other people that agree with me to come in, maybe join the conversation even and like stuff, but you have to be aware of these things. And the thing when it starts to get wrong is when I would say, okay, I did that in order to try to convince this person that he's wrong, because that's not the case, right? I didn't do that to try to convince them that I'm correct, right? I did it out of frustration, out of anger to some extent, and I think that's fine. But try not to just like sell it differently. I guess that's the point that I would make.
It's really good to acknowledge too, with power dynamics amongst YouTubers when it comes to retweeting accounts and stuff, because I've had to question that. And there was a time when I had retweeted somebody and I wasn't like, I was supporting them, like I was just like going off of the thought that they had, but they had interpreted as I was like criticizing them, and they gotten like really worried and concerned about it. And I was like, fuck, did I mess up here? And that kind of got me thinking, when I realized that I did that unintentionally, got somebody anxious. It's like, I think just being careful as to who. There's a difference between me critiquing someone who's a public figure and who has a large platform versus me just retweeting some random person. Now, if some random person is actively degrading me, then I think at that point, it's like, you're on a public platform. You have some responsibility here. I have every right to respond. But if I'm just going out of my way to, mock somebody else, I think I think now is a good point in my, I guess, like YouTube career, if you want to call it that, to start considering those things because I'm still such a small creator. But as more power you get, those things that you're used to doing and those outlets that you're used to having, they might become a little bit more dangerous because you retweeting somebody and mocking them could create some side effects that you aren't prepared for. And you do have some responsibility towards.
Yes, that's... Sorry, go ahead.
No, Philip, you haven't spoken much. Don't let me.
I just wanted to say that it's true that's a part of the conversation, but there is another part which is just if you want to find out whether or not what you're saying is correct or not, right? Having a large audience and retweeting someone that has a very small audience can be like a terrible way to find out, right? Because what is going to happen inevitably is that because you have such a large audience, when you speak your mind, a lot more people are going to agree with you than with the person that you're sort of retweeting in this case, right? So you're never going to feel like you're sort of doing something wrong because you're always going to have this large amount of support, and it's always going to be higher than the support this other person is getting, right? But that is going to be an artifact not of the actual content of what you're saying and this other person is saying. It's not going to be based on the quality of the arguments that are being presented. It's going to be purely based on the fact that you have more supporters that you collected than this other person. So that can really distort, your view of things, because whatever you're going to say, essentially, it's going to appear to you as you being correct, right? Because you have such a large audience, right? No matter what you say, it's always it's always going to appear correct to you because you're gonna be swarmed with an avalanche of support.
Yeah, groupthink is a real issue, and it plagues. But I think there's another side to this, which I think Shannon's kind of segued into it for me perfectly. So, sorry,
did you see it? I looked at the chat.
Yeah, I looked at the chat. And I was like, oh. So does that mean there's a different set of acceptable behavioural standards for different groups of people? I personally would say yes, there is.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is not only because of what you guys are saying about reinforcing beliefs and echo chambers, essentially, which is what I think you are alluding to, but also the potential impact that could have on someone else. So, for instance, if say, I'm trying to think of someone really famous. Say Justin Bieber retweeted somebody who had 30 followers saying, "Look how much of an idiot this person is." Imagine all the people that would then go and dogpile on that individual and bully that individual and tell them how stupid they are and stuff. And that has a real it's easy enough to say, internet is internet and it's not real life and stuff, but people have the same kind of reaction to negative comments on the internet as they do to in real life a lot of the time, and sometimes even worse because something that might be quite inane is actually taken as something quite horrible, depending on how they've looked at it. So for me, I think the more of a following you have, the more influence you have over others, the more responsible you are for your actions regarding
with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. That's it, Joe. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think that blast radius, as Shannon put it, if the larger your impact, the more responsible you have to be with what you're saying and what you're doing, because you could actually have a massive impact on someone's life. You could, really cause them to leave the internet, cause them to feel, really low, stuff like that. And I think it's one of those things that we have to take into account when we're on public forums. I think we have to take that into account.
You could. Worst case scenario, you're responsible for a suicide.
It's awesome to consider that when you're still small, to be frank. I think jumping into critiquing other creators, since that's kind of what I started building my platform on, I learned that really quick, because I had to think about a lot of the things that I was doing. And I actually have another video on this where I guess it plays into power dynamics. I didn't think about it when I posted it, but it does. Because I was talking about, or I guess I didn't think about it when I got on the stream, but I was talking about being friends with your patrons and if that's okay. And, I was talking about how abuse can unintentionally happen. And, even me as a small creator who has 13 patrons, it's like if I get on my Discord and I'm just sitting here venting whenever I feel like it because I don't have a support system that I can rely on. It's like, but am I going to be able to be there for those 13 people? Or are they going to have a crisis, reach out to me, and I'm not there in the way that they're there for me because I'm the person that they're paying money towards. I'm the person that they're financially supporting, that they're a fan of, essentially. And it's good to keep those things in mind. And I think it's great that you guys are doing that, earlier in time, because it's hard to make that transition. It's different from being a viewer to, being a creator and having these responsibilities that like you maybe hadn't thought too much about before. So.
But yeah, I think this came up a few weeks back, I guess now. I think Nathan from Digital Gnosis, talked to Jordan Peterson about something, and then Jordan Peterson retweeted him, and he got swarmed by Jordan Peterson fans, disagreeing with him. That was very weird. But I think what Nathan realized, and this is what I'm trying to highlight, I guess, in this conversation, it's not just about the person that you're retweeting that is going to have a bad day, and even worse than that sometimes, right? Because depending on the backslash that you're going to get, it can be very ugly. But it's also that having such a following is essentially creating the perfect echo chamber for you, right? Because like the regular echo chamber is just you sort of interacting and only saying the things that you agree with. But that's like a passive thing. When you have a large audience, you're essentially having a portable echo chamber. Not only do you just see the things that you agree with, but you also automatically get support on everything that you say. It's not just about the content that you see, it's also like an echo chamber on your own things that you're saying, because it's never going to happen that you're not going to have support on the things that you're saying, because every time you're going to get support from your fans, from your fan base. So it's almost like you have to put a much higher artificial sort of skepticism to what you're saying, because you know that once you say it, it's going to feel like what you're saying is completely correct, right? And you're going to have this avalanche of people agreeing with you, no matter what you say.
Maybe that's
so you
the
have to be
benefit
more
of having
careful.
friends that disagree with you.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so important also to criticize these types of behaviors, because you're mitigating this phenomenon as well.
Yeah, I push back against having friends that disagree on a larger scale. But I do think that, it's not black and white. A lot of people on the internet lack nuance. Everything has to be black and white. And I do think there's a point where it's like, does somebody have to be, you could think that they're wrong about something. They could even be hurting people, with what they're promoting as a creator. But, maybe we have to consider the fact of trying to make sure that we are keeping an open dialogue to some extent, to where because people have to exist. They're not just going to disappear. They're going to keep existing in this world. So, finding a way to allow people to exist and allow people to have conversations while making sure you're holding your own moral standards, making sure you're keeping true to that, but also, treating people as human beings, even if they themselves can't treat everyone like human beings.
Yeah, I think the best way to think about it, at least from my side, what helps me is just to think that the best way to try to change their mind is to be sort of not a dick to them, even though you might feel like they deserve it, right? Because if you're not a dick to them, you're increasing the chances. I do think that this is true. You're increasing the chances of changing their mind and making sure that in the future they're not going to promote the ideas that you deem harmful. Right? So I think from a practical perspective as well, it makes sense to treat people with some level of respect, at least in for as much as you can in conversations, because this has the practical benefit of increasing the chances of you changing their minds. That's yeah.
I mean, you might
Before
get to
we
a
get to
point
the
where
questions.
you realize that you go, right, no, I'm not anymore. You get to the end of your tether, and I can understand getting to that point too.
Oh yeah,
but I think there are too many
Philip
people
does
that
get to the end of
start
tether.
at the end. There are too many people that start at the end, and then you need to start respectfully and try and have a good conversation for a decent amount of time before you get to that point where you're a complete bell end to them.
Yeah. one thing I just want to make sure is clear before we move away from that conversation. I agree with what everyone's saying, obviously, but I think something that happens far too often is marginalized groups get villainized because of the way they're responding. And I think it's okay for us to have these conversations and recognize that we might be in a privileged position and not expect, say, a trans person to be nearly as open with how they feel when they're the ones that are being impacted. And I don't like the idea of policing any marginalized group and how they are responding to abuse, whether it's systematic or, personal, the things that they've experienced. It's like they have a right to feel angry, and we can't police how they're expressing their anger when it's just them expressing it with words. If they're not act like they're being violent or something, it's like you just see people say things like, oh, well, you made me transphobic because you said that, so I'm transphobic now, or you made me racist with that comment. And that's just really disgusting. And I just want to make sure that we're clear in that there is a privilege that exists when you are able to be friends with people that disagree with you, whether even if you think it's small, it might not be small to somebody else.
Oh, God, yeah. And everyone has their own tolerances. If I'm like they're saying, like for instance, earlier when I was talking about, the health racism and stuff, right? Because I could stay relatively calm because it's not something that impacts me personally, right? But I would not expect somebody who's from that community to not get angry at that conversation. Not even in this space where we're discussing it and we're on their side, we understand it, and we're also kind of like completely disgusted by the fact that it still happens. They would still get angry in this conversation and might start sounding like they're getting angry towards us when they're not. I think that there's people expect people to just be calm and stuff and not get mad, but
But I could imagine them being angry with us as well
personally.
for not arguing for it as passionately as the topic actually deserves.
Yeah.
I can understand that. I mean,
true.
unfortunately, like you mentioned, because it's something that doesn't directly impact us, except through friends that we might have, it's not going to be something that hits quite as emotional. So we can sit here and have a conversation about it in a rational manner and point out all the issues, but what we don't necessarily have is that real world experience of it happening to us that can cause the emotional response. And I think, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, I guess on that mental health thread, or the thread about religion is a mental illness. That's why my tolerance was very low for that. So I became sarcastic and insulting very quickly in that thread because it is something that I'm passionate about, and it made me mad that people are saying that when other people who may be a little bit further removed from the kind of work that I do and the kind of like experiences I've had personally might be able to explain it in a bit more of a calmer manner that makes more sense and is less like kind of like condescending, because I did become condescending. It was ridiculous. Like some of the stuff, it made me angry. I was there angry. And I had to leave Twitter because of it and make a stream and all this stuff. But I, honestly, I have my rants on.
Wait, I missed that. You made a stream?
Yeah.
You made a stream. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was with Philip and Dave. And I think I managed to control my emotions enough. I did have a couple rants in it, but they were okay. But yeah, it was.
It's okay.
It was
it's okay though too to have those responses. I mean, I think that's what's important to remember. It's just there's just such nuance to the world, and sometimes the internet lacks that.
Most definitely,
and offering the allowances that are needed, for people to express themselves, and we can express ourselves and also recognize privilege and recognize, maybe we have biases and maybe we're not, completely articulating things in the way that is, I guess, up to par with the harm that it could be causing somebody outside of us, And I think it's all about acknowledging those things, kind of like with power imbalances. They all exist. It's just a matter of acknowledging it so that you can work to cause the least harm possible. And I think that's all that we can, strive to do as a species.
And equally, if you're someone that doesn't care about things like nuance and logic, and you see things in a very binary way, that's very fine for you to actually do that. I'm not expecting anyone to engage in interests that don't interest them. But I think if you have a platform where you have a lot of power, then again, you could influence others to not care about nuance, or to actually talk out against people that do appreciate the nuance. Like we've mentioned tonight, there are a few different things that we've spoken about that actually show the situations are far more complex. And to be honest, we are giving a very, very glossy overview as well. I mean, we've been chatting for a couple of hours, and we haven't got into some of the more meat of the topics that we could do. We're having a great conversation. I've been really enjoying it, but there's so much more that could be said about any of the topics that we're discussing. So we love the nuance, but if you want to keep things, really high level and really basic, that's fine. I mean, just appreciate that there are other people that like to take things a little bit deeper too, and don't talk out against people who are saying, and take a more nuanced view on things. I do want to get to some of the questions and comments.
No, I'm just kidding.
I think I said before we get to the comments like 20 minutes ago. We could just sit here and talk for hours.
I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could.
could.
Yeah. Right. I am going to try and get to the comments in the chat. I apologize if I miss any. Folks, please feel free to tag me back in and ask a question now as I go back through. I'm almost an hour back in time with some of the questions that have come in. Now, I know Mark left because he had to go, but I will ask his question. He says, so this is going back to the COVID vax thing. He says, mine workers here in Australia are very hesitant about taking the COVID vaccination. Do you think there's much influence with them being in secluded communities and reinforcing people's beliefs?
Yes. Well, I think. Sorry, just to give a meatier answer to that, I guess. Groups of people tend to begin to share beliefs, regardless of who they are, and that's like kind of an in-group bias that we've evolved to have in order to survive. And I think that if they're an isolated community. And they have a concept about kind of vaccines or something, or especially if they're kind of like I think mine workers have historically been kind of frowned upon in many different kind of communities. I know in the UK they were frowned upon. So I think a lot of the things that we're seeing around anti-vaxxers, specifically being in marginalized groups, is an attempt almost to take control and to not be done upon further. And I think that's probably what's happened in this case, essentially, although I don't know much about it, and I think that groupthink and in-group biases really impact that. And also there's an element of the same thing you get in religious groups as well, where you have to toe the line in order to be accepted in that group, especially in small communities. So there may be some people that don't agree, but they say they agree because they want to make sure that they can remain a part of that group.
They don't want to be othered.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we experience that quite regularly online ourselves when we.
But we don't give a shit.
Yeah, I mean, we don't, but we do experience that sort of thing ourselves. Where clearly you're not an atheist; you must be a theist because you don't agree with this thing that other atheists say. All right, well, and if we cared that much, we wouldn't say the things that we'd say. We'd keep quiet about it, and that's a bit of a power dynamic there. So within a particular community,
of the left eating the left, eating the left is kind of what they're saying. Atheists are eating other atheists, so therefore, you don't really care.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's an element of speaking truth to power, isn't there? And maybe that's what a lot of anti-vaxxers think they're doing, is speaking truth to power, saying, you can't control me, you can't take away my bodily autonomy, etc. When the nuance of what the vaccine is trying to do is being lost on them because of various cultural reasons that they're not kind of looking into and stuff. So, yeah.
Can I talk about the question real quick? The answer is yes, obviously, but I'm wondering maybe if I could come at it as like what we can do to help prevent that. And I think one of the biggest things, honestly, is if you're considering being a creator and making content, yeah, I mean, go for it, because a lot of it is extremely difficult to get somebody out of that secluded mindset and those echo chambers. And if you actually want to make an impact, I mean, you're not going to be able to go about it in any of the ways that our instincts are telling us to go about it. It's not going to work just telling them that they're wrong. I think representation is the best tool that we have, whether that be being a YouTube creator or even, and you know, this is kind of my nerdy side coming out, but even my more entertainment wise, like TV shows and movies. Like when you think about, you know, me personally being a queer person, I had a lot of internalized homophobia growing up, and the town that I lived in was so homophobic. You know, I mean, it was just completely normal. I mean, my grandma told me I shouldn't be friends with my lesbian friend, and I stopped being friends with her. You know, I mean, that's how toxic it was, you know, back in middle school. So my first experience in getting out of that was literally finding a TV show that had representation that I hadn't seen before, and realizing that it was okay, and sympathizing with those characters. That's why there's such power to fiction and representation that sort of gets overlooked a lot of the times because they see it as, oh, it's just fiction, you know, and it's like, but this is a massive tool that actually can reach people that are in these echo chambers, because we all seek entertainment. All of us do this, you know, and it's same with YouTubers. I mean, for people that just like watching YouTube videos, and there are people that do that. I definitely do it, you know, so.
You watch YouTube?
Not as much anymore, being a YouTube creator, actually.
Icarus actually has another point on this. It says, we follow the most charismatic or most popular people instead of the guys with the best ideas. Evolution screwed us.
What's the name of that prime minister who was really good but really boring, and that's why he got voted out? Is it Neville Chamberlain?
John Major?
John Major, that's it. Yeah, John Major. John Major, yeah. Like, everyone forgets about him, but he was, like, supposed to be really good, but he was just really boring.
He was a Tory, and I supported him. That shows you how good of a prime minister he was.
You know, that reminds me of, I'm thinking about Bernie Sanders now, because I love Bernie, but there were times when it was like, he didn't have the charisma that, let's say, why can I think right now? Ocasio-Cortez does, you know, like with being able to move people with the speeches as much, you know, what he's saying is true, but yeah, charisma and being able to be that tool of being compelling to people and intriguing, you know, it's not just about having all the answers and being right. You also have to be able to, you know, drag people in and interest people. And I think that's something that get lost if we're talking about big YouTube creators. I think that's something that can get lost sometimes when people do start just kind of doing this and like having a formula for how they make their videos, and not just sitting in front of a camera and being human, you know, and not being like an actor. That was a rant, but anyways. Let's go. Everyone's really quiet.
Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through the chat and find people, what everyone's saying. Sorry. I agree with what you say, though, Brina, that Philip hasn't talked nearly as much as he should. Yeah. Philip,
I mean,
it's all your fault.
I mean that is a given at this point. But no, I really enjoyed this conversation.
I haven't talked as much either.
Yeah.
Dave only talks when he has something really wise to say.
Basically,
Yeah, exactly.
Dave is waiting for the
Let's just
opportunity to
silence
say
him,
one
Philip. I'm
thing
gonna
and
keep
just
talking over
destroy
him.
the whole stream. That's all he's going to
Yeah.
do. He's going to say one thing at the end. We're going to go, fuck it, let's say it now.
There was a stream we had where we were talking.
I was joking when I said let's keep interrupting Philip. I actually did it now.
Sorry, Philip.
I can't carry on now.
I know I ruined it for you, didn't I?
See, I'm trying to be like Dave.
Sorry,
you
what?
know, the guy that is the guy that is wise at the end, but I'm miserably failing. So at the beginning, I was trying to keep that up, but then, I mean, I just don't have as much, I guess, to say on this topic in the sense that I haven't thought about it this much. So I generally just enjoyed listening to this. Felt like I had some.
I have, and I've learned a lot as well. So thank you.
I can't shut up. So
Thanks for feeding our egos. Now we don't have to feel bad. So, thanks for that.
Was it because there was a power dynamic? Because at the moment, at least on the stream, the three of us are all on top, and you guys feel beneath us.
Yeah,
That
might be,
some bottoms.
definitely. Yeah.
And I know you lined it up that way just to do that.
You guys are gonna have to lip sync for your life.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the chat and trying.
Can I bring up Shannon's most recent point? I think it's something I relate to.
Yeah,
a
go on
lot.
then, and then I'll go back up. We'll start at
Yeah,
the bottom
it
and
gives you a
work our way
chance-
back up. Right, there you
Gives
go.
you a chance to search for stuff, I think, as well. So Shannon says, in relation to I think what you were saying, Brina, she says about how that's why she allows people to advocate for their own understanding, and she stays up all night worried that she got something wrong and people believed her. And I absolutely completely relate to that. There's been multiple times recently where I've ended a stream and I can't remember anything I've said, and I'm like, did I say something really stupid? And I genuinely watched the whole stream back immediately after.
Kudos
I
to
do
you
that
for
too.
having the bravery to do that. See, my anxiety is way too high. Me, it's
Yeah.
like it's out there, it's done. I wait for people. Like if I can remember I said something, I'll go back and correct it. Or like maybe in a new video. I usually go overboard. I'm like making posts on Twitter, and then I'm like making a new video because I have that same fear. But man, it's hard to have to go back and rewatch yourself, though, isn't it? Like I just got recently used to being able to watch my premieres and have the volume on because I'm like, I don't know, I don't want to hear myself talk.
Yeah.
Other people do. I don't.
It's. I think I'm used to because I used to edit videos and stuff, make short videos and stuff, and I got kind of like vlogging for a little. Yeah, handgun. He remembers. Got find out vlogging for a little while, and so I was used to watching myself and like could cut out different things I got wrong.
Mhm.
So I got used to it then, but now obviously on a stream, like it's no holds barred. Basically, what you say is
Right.
up there, right?
Yeah, you're
So
fucked.
then I have to watch it back, and actually, I find it quite reassuring because then I like see myself a bit more objectively and go, actually, I didn't say anything that was that dumb. Like I might disagree with one thing that I said or the wording that I used, but
This
usually,
is where the lack of nuance comes in too, making sure
Yeah.
that you maybe bring up those conversations whenever you're having those controversial topics or discussions, so that making sure you're kind of attracting an audience that is aware of your opinion about nuances and understands where you're coming from, and that you're doing a live stream and it's okay to misspeak or not say things exactly how you wanted.
Yeah.
And if you do say something wrong, you can correct it. We're human. And it's okay to have that space for people. I think the biggest thing with being afraid that you're going to hurt somebody, accidentally with saying the
Yeah.
wrong thing, is making sure that you're holding a space where they can talk and they feel safe, and that you don't get defensive. I talked about this in one of my live streams about transphobia. I had a few very lovely trans people in my comments who were, I can't even remember. I think it was about I was overusing assigned female at birth, I think, to a point where it didn't need to be needed, or it was something about that. It was a while back. But I could tell in the way that they were responding to me that they were so scared I was going to lash out at them. Like they were like, it was just so overly nice. Like, like you didn't say anything wrong, but like maybe this, like, it was just very like, I I would have to go back and read the comments, but it felt very like they were afraid that I was going to turn against them because I wasn't going to hold that space.
Because you were
for them to be able
essentially
to say
being
how they
too
feel.
sensitive in their regard, almost like going over top with the
Yeah,
sensitive
like
language.
they're like, I need to be really sensitive, otherwise, I won't listen to what they have to say. And it's not so much like being kind is bad. It's not like they didn't do anything wrong. It's just more of like, I brought it up in my live stream because I'm like, that kind of saddens me. It saddened me that I have trans people in my audience that are like, I don't feel safe in a lot of these other places because I'm scared to correct them, because I'm scared to mention maybe this isn't the right word to use. I've been corrected on, for example, saying trans men and trans women when I was typing. I didn't even realize I was doing this, and I didn't put a space in between. And I've been told, hey, trans is an adjective. Like you wouldn't say a white woman and not have a space. You know what I mean? So when you put it together, you're othering them essentially. And, and I immediately, listened, and I realized like, okay. And like, we had a conversation, and I realized why I needed to stop doing that. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of times when people have those corrections, they aren't met with that. And I have that instinct too sometimes. Sometimes you get defensive. I've been there too. But it's just, we just have to have this awareness to just help us understand.
We have to be told by the people it applies to, isn't it? We have to be told by the people it applies to.
Most definitely.
And it goes back to those echo chambers too. If you're just shooting them down and then you're just hearing a bunch of people agree with you, you're not really listening then. Like, it's okay to have a conversation. It's okay to be wrong. I know it's uncomfortable and it sucks. Nobody likes it, but it's okay. We all do it. Like, it's
okay to be wrong as long as you're willing to learn. I think it's not okay to be wrong and then double down and continue saying you're right.
And then also continue hurting people if you're just like shutting them up and potentially perpetuating abuse against a marginalized group because you're like, well, I know this other trans person and they disagree with you. So, sorry.
Danish Debater has a question saying, what are your takes on the recent SE sheet for talking to the vaccine hesitant? Now, this isn't something I've seen. Are any of you aware of this?
No, not seen it.
No.
What is the SE sheet?
I don't know. It's a sheet that's been resent. That's about as much as I know. Danish, dude.
I think it's street epistemology. Something, right? Like,
I can sort of imagine how the discussion would go, but I've not actually seen the sheet itself.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave,
wait.
Before we go down there, Dave's got an opinion about street epistemology in general. So why don't you just?
That was so ominous. Like, what does that mean?
I think it's an okay tool. Yeah, and it can help get people to think, but I think it's only half of the discussion that needs to take place when it comes to that kind of discussion.
Yeah.
I think the Socratic method is a far superior method to it.
I think the way you've described it before, Dave, is you've said street epistemology is basically half of the Socratic method.
Half the Socratic method, yeah.
You're basically doing the bit where you deconstruct and make someone doubt without the whole search for the truth within whatever.
Getting them to start thinking about it in that way rather than just doubting how they think.
Yeah.
That's kind of fitting for street epistemology, though, because I think street epistemology is just kind of like you're planting those seeds, but you're not going to be able to sit there and check in with them next week and see where they're at.
It can happen during the discussion, though, rather than just...
That's fair.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you leave someone in a state of doubt and then you don't know what I think actually people would tend to, just knowing what I know about like how people think and stuff, they'll double down on their beliefs when they go back to their church or something, because they'll have the discussion. They'll be like, this person really broke down this stuff. And then that person will be like, well, you had a moment of doubt. That's a very kind of Christian thing. And then they'll reinforce their beliefs in Christ through talking with their minister or something like that. So not building those beliefs back up in that moment, and actually just We don't know what's happening.
You're not really validating their doubts. You're just planting them.
It looks
Like,
good for
you're not
YouTube and
validating
stuff. I
it,
think
so
you
they
know, and
why
it's
they're doubting.
it's good for
Yeah.
starting a conversation. But then I think that it's you know, I don't even
Doubting your
think.
beliefs is scary. Like,
Yeah.
especially when I was a theist, I remember when those doubts came.
Where
Like,
would
I
you
didn't
go,
even really
right?
register. Yeah, I panicked. It was
Understood.
panicking. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I started doubting, and this is going to sound silly, probably, but American education system. When I started doubting my beliefs in creationism as like a 7th grader, I went out to my local Christian store and I got a Kent Hovind book. Because I panicked and I was like, fuck, like, is this like, I needed to reaffirm my beliefs. I don't even remember what caused me to doubt it, but like that's your instinct to reassure yourself.
To reaffirm them.
Yeah, reaffirm them. Yeah, especially in like religious circles, because that's what they do when they have moments of doubt. That is part of their doctrine. I think is it Anthony? His surname
Magnabosco.
I think he's a really nice guy. The problem I have with his videos is that he doesn't check in with the people that he's doing this with afterwards, so we don't actually know what the effect of it is.
I mean,
he says it works. There's no aftercare or.
I've seen some of his discussions, and I've seen discussions where he literally has a puzzle piece system or something like that, where he gives out pieces to the person he converses with, and encourages them to collect all the pieces, right? To come back to talk to him and think about what they discussed and essentially checks in on them again. Right? So it's not entirely just, leaving them aside. And I've seen discussions that were actually quite good. So I personally, I don't know if I have that much of an issue with street epistemology per se as a method, but I think there is a lot of things surrounding it that I'm a bit worrisome about.
Maybe how it's being utilized by the community.
First of all, there is the discussion. Yeah, I think that first of all, there is this discussion about power dynamics again, maybe, right? Because it's very easy to induce skepticism into people, right? Like, I don't think people realize just how easy it is to deconstruct people's beliefs, right? Because it's just a matter of asking, repeatedly, what's your justification for that, and eventually you get to a point where things get uncomfortable for the person that is sort of trying to justify things, right? So, like the process of just questioning why they believe repeatedly it can be effective to analyze your beliefs, but it has to be seen that way, right? You have to go in thinking, well, I'm doing this in order to see every step of the way why I believe in the things that I believe, and not like as a way to, see, you're not ultimately justified in anything that you believe, because that's the way it sometimes gets used. And I think that sometimes it's just to sort of induce this conclusion in that you're not actually believing for good reasons or something like that, right? That at the end of the day, you're not believing for good reasons. But the problem with that is that, and I think some people realize this, that you can do the same game with with a lot of beliefs, not just sort of including atheists, right? Like you can do the same skeptic game with pretty much every belief that you hold, right? Like, ask yourself about even scientific things, right? You're going to struggle at some point to justify things because this is the natural progression of sort of justification. At some point, you're going to get into trouble. That's, by the way, why sort of presuppositionalists are so hard to argue against sometimes, because they play this very game, right? And then they make atheists look like idiots sometimes, because they get to this point where it seems like they have no justification, and then they pretend like they won the conversation essentially because they got to this point. But so yeah, there are a lot of things that surrounding it that I'm a bit not so sure about. But the method itself, I don't think there is anything wrong per se with that.
Well, you bringing up all those points kind of begs me to ask the question. Because it's street epistemology, correct me if I'm wrong, you're basically just out in public and you're asking people questions and you're purposely seeking these conversations, right? Which means you're purposely seeking to plant doubt likely about views that you disagree with. Is that proselytizing?
Not
Is
even
that
necessarily that you
version?
disagree with. You could agree with a person and you're still making them question
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah, but it tends to be things that
It does tend to
that
be,
they-
but I'm just saying
yeah,
you could
things
use it
like
for anything.
belief. Yeah,
I mean,
in
have a
supernatural is
conversation
very
with
popular.
Dave, right? And he could completely agree with you and still get you doubting your position. He's that kind of
Okay,
wanker.
yeah. I guess, I thought
He can
about
make-
this earlier. No, go ahead. Somebody was going to say something.
I was just going to say he can make you believe something that he does not believe.
I was thinking about this earlier with power dynamics, and we were talking about atheist community and religion. And then it got me thinking about power dynamics with Christians who target vulnerable people to convert, and the power dynamic there, because, they're seeking out people that are deliberately vulnerable. And it had me ask the question to myself, and I'm not saying I have the answer to this. I'm genuinely wondering, do atheists target vulnerable people? Are we hurting people with this community, with the superiority that we have? Are we perpetuating what we're against, even because we think it's for the best? And maybe I obviously think we're right, but how we go about that, could it be causing harm? Could we be trying to erase somebody's culture by acting like all religions are bad? Is there some supremacy or racism that could be ingrained in that too? There's just, I don't know, it just got me thinking about those things and the power dynamic between atheist and theist when we seek to deconvert, which I don't think we should be doing anyway. I think we should just be seeking to have conversation. But even in those conversations, you could still go about them the wrong way.
Yeah. For me, I think the biggest aspect of that harmful aspect, is having people think that they're holding a rational position, but then giving them the permission to not have to justify it, so they're not able to actually understand why they're holding that position.
Yeah.
And I think that can put people in quite vulnerable positions, because it means that when they actually get into a discussion with somebody who knows what they're talking about, they get overwhelmed by it.
Right.
And I think what I'd prefer to see is people giving people good justifications for why they believe stuff. I couldn't justify my atheism prior. I couldn't justify my atheism prior to. I don't know how to word this. When I became an atheist, I couldn't justify my atheism. I became an atheist because I felt like it didn't make sense to me. Religion and stuff didn't make sense to me. Theism didn't make sense to me, right? And now I am able to justify, and I still agree with that position. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are in the position where they feel like it doesn't make sense. Theism doesn't make sense to them, because of various reasons, because maybe what the basic understanding of science they have. But then it doesn't go much further than that. But then they're also now being given permission to say, I don't need to justify my point. And that one is not very interesting, because you're not exploring yourself and your beliefs and your humanity and your experience and why you have this. It's also just your preparedness for when you talk to someone who may know a bit more about this stuff than you do. Yeah.
Shannon's done really well at this too in some of her videos. I enjoy, and it's something that I enjoy talking about too, our brains and why we have these experiences. And I think that's what a lot of atheists miss, or they say it in such a condescending way. And it's like, you can't deny that they're having these experiences. They are experiencing this. This is their perception. Let's talk about why. And let's actually have a conversation about it. Let's talk about what's going on in the brain. Let's talk about how when we have certain emotions tied to an event that we perceive to be supernatural, it's harder for us to, combat the idea that it was supernatural because I'm so emotionally tied to it. For example, people that might be at a funeral and feel this overwhelmed. I mean, this is actually coming from one of my family members, being overcome by a feeling of peace, and feeling like the person that they just lost is there with them. And thinking first off, is the person, if somebody says that to you, are they consenting to having a conversation where you point out what could actually be happening? Because that's a very traumatic situation, and I don't think anybody should be purposely trying to go in and poke holes, in that situation, which is what I did with my family member, because we were talking about atheism and religion. I asked her before we went any further, I was like, do you want me to talk about why I think you had that experience? And she said no, and I respected that. you know, and that's that, because we have to be careful and how we engage with conversations.
Well, especially,
but
and I
allowing
think.
them to happen.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, that was
Just
it.
get
I was pretty
passionate.
much at the end of my thought.
I
Go ahead.
think Shannon's video yesterday brings up a really good point about that very thing, and about how people who are religious cope with, and I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow, cope with death by believing people are still there and believing people are around and believing that's a coping strategy. If you rip that away by just saying, well, this is what I think it is, it's just brain chemistry or whatever, and it's the same thing. You're leaving them with nothing to fill that gap. And I feel like a lot of atheists are in that position where they've consumed a bunch of atheist content online that is very callous and very kind of like just like, well, it's stupid or it's silly or it's an imaginary friend or etc. Their beliefs have been completely deconstructed, and then it leaves them in a state of like kind of like just nowhere to go, and there's
no validation.
nothing to fill those gaps. Yeah, there's nothing to fill those gaps about how to cope with death or how to form your community or etc. How to what's your purpose and stuff. It's just like our purpose is whatever we decide it is, but that's not enough. You need to expand on that.
Yeah.
How do you find that? How do you find that thing? I think it is. It's one of those things that it's just yeah. Don't know where I was actually going.
A lot of atheists like to use the term secular humanist a lot. We've all kind of adopted that term, but it seems like not many are actually falling back to humanistic values.
No,
it's just
it's
atheism
an
when they're
aesthetic
actually
thing
engaging
again.
with people. Yeah, because it's like, if you care about secular humanism, then you should care about how you're engaging people and the impact that you could be leaving and the harm that you could be doing. And I've said this before, but just because somebody is popularized and somebody is maybe helped to deconstruct a lot of these beliefs, that doesn't make the harm that they're causing invalid. The way I view my YouTube career and who I am as a person, if I impact one person positively or negatively, that means so much to me, because I am just one person. So we have to, I feel like, remember that and keep that in mind, that you can't like drown yourself in it when you fuck up and you say the wrong thing. But it's a good way to approach conversations, and just remember that people are people and they deserve to be, treated with respect. And obviously you can lose respect for somebody. That's fine. We're valid in our anger and all of that, when somebody is hurting people, and that's fine. But you can't go into it with automatically this just combative nature, and it's all black and white and there is no nuance, and we're enemies basically because we disagree. And because I think you're hurting people and you think I'm hurting people, like that doesn't get us anywhere. We just have to learn when it's okay to be angry and when it's time to pull back and just listen.
Yeah, that
what you say
kind of maturity,
sorry,
if you're
go for it.
able to distinguish these two modes that you're in, right? Like
Therapy.
and also
Therapy. Go get therapy. Everyone. That's how you get that maturity, though. Seriously.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen.
yeah.
No, go ahead. You were
No, I was basically that was my point, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That in growing your sort of way of thinking and maturing your way of thinking, I think it's fine if you find yourself in this angry mode. It's not about just removing this angry mode forever.
Right.
It's about recognizing where you're in this angry mode and when it's time to pull back and actually have a conversation and maybe try to convince other people in a civil manner, right? I think that's the best way to converse. Also, I have to let Luke speak because I feel him pulsing with. No, you don't want to talk. Oh, you're in the chat. Okay, then.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, the trauma therapy I've had. Sorry, just real quick. I know it's not something that everybody's going to have because well, actually, I don't know. I feel like everybody experiences trauma. I feel like we weaponize our experiences of like who was hurt more, who has the shittier life more, like the oppression Olympics, when really it's like we all experience trauma to some level. And I think it's important to validate people in that sense. And
Great.
A lot of what Philip was talking about, with the maturity that comes with recognizing that anger, it does kind of come down to people getting in fight or flight responses. and not knowing how to see outside of themselves. And something I really learned in therapy was being able to find that comfort in seeing myself with a critical eye and realizing I was validated in why I was experiencing those things. I have the explanation. I know what's happening in my brain, but now figuring out how to come back from that so I can have healthier relationships and, live a happy life, for me, because the healthier my relationships are, the happier I'm going to be. So it's not like it's all selfless, but okay, I interrupted somebody. Go on.
No, I was going to continue with one of your points. So you were talking about how there is definitely a benefit some of the big names might bring to the table, but we still shouldn't excuse when they do something negative as well. And sometimes because they are a big name, their negative behaviors get excused, which ties in with a question from Danish Debater, which said, you talked about defense despite reason due to fandom. What about snap judgments and lacking forgiveness as well? So I suppose that could tie into making snap judgments about a person because of who they are, but also maybe lacking forgiveness because when someone is wrong, even if they hold up their hands, sometimes they don't get the "Hey, Papa." Sometimes they don't actually get the positive response for holding up their hands and admitting that they were wrong. So sometimes doubling down and reasserting their position and being protected by the fandom is not necessarily the right choice of action, but at least for the moment, the more sensible one for them from a selfish perspective, at least.
Yeah. I actually have a lot of opinions on this. So
Go for it. That's why you're here.
So I have a lot of different perspectives, I think, and that's why. Trying to think of where to start. So, okay. First off, and something that I see, I'm going to start with the negative. Something that I see a lot of people lacking is understanding that you don't have a right. You don't have a right to request people to forgive you when you fuck up. You just don't. It's okay to take accountability for it and do the right thing. Great. This is where the nuance comes in and where a lot of people lack it. From my perspective as an abuse survivor, I don't forgive my abuser at all. And one person is absolutely dead to me. I can't. I think they're just evil, and that might be irrational. I literally think they're the embodiment of evil. But then I have other people that were sort of condoning it or didn't do anything about it, and I don't forgive them. But my perspective of it is just because I don't forgive you doesn't mean that you don't have a right to go on and live your best life and be the best that you can be. But that doesn't mean there's not consequences to your actions, and that doesn't mean that you are owed my forgiveness. And I kind of see it the same way with parasocial relationships. People get really attached to these creators, and when they find out that they said something racist or anti-Semitic or transphobic or biphobic or homophobic, they can feel really hurt by that. And when you kind of associate, you just kind of lump everyone together and you're like, they're going to be mad at me no matter what, and you just kind of rub it off. It's just but you're not really acknowledging how they feel and the harm that you cause them. And you're not validating that it's okay if you don't forgive me. That's fine. And the thing is, when people get tired of things getting brought up over and over again, even no matter how bad it was, 5 years, why am I still getting asked about this? It's because you're a public figure and some people don't know that this happened, and then it gets brought up again and people get really defensive, and it's bro, just apologize. That's it. You don't have to keep, if you want, you don't have to keep this victimized self because you're getting this lashback. It's about emotional maturity. That's really what it comes down to, and being able to recognize certain things and being able to come on and be these are the videos that I've made on this before. I've seen that this is coming up again. If you were affected, if you were impacted by what I said, I am sorry. It was the wrong thing to say. And that's it. Just leave it at that. Unfortunately, when you're a public figure, this is the downside of things, because your words, when you say them, they don't just impact people the moment that they're said. They're going to impact people 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when your videos are still up and are still being circulated and are creating cultures and comments and attracting people and starting conversations that are actually harming people, you know, and that fucking sucks. Like, it sucks that that's the amount of responsibility we have, but it's there. You know, so how do we navigate it?
I think there's a weird kind of like pride thing about people not wanting to delete old content that's caused controversy or stuff that they don't agree with anymore. Personally, if I stopped agreeing with something that I had created or it had offended people and I hadn't realized, and then they told me that they were offended by it, I'd delete it immediately. And I don't see any issues with that because it's, like you said, Brina, it's going to impact people without any context.
That's actually a mistake that a lot of people make. They don't delete it. They think that if they delete it, then they're like denying that it happened. And it's like, you're taking this prideful stance when it's like, that's not what it's about. Look at the comments under the video that you have that's still up there circulating. What type of culture are you allowing to continue on your platform? So why are you leaving the video up? Yeah, exactly. And it's being used to potentially harm and justify more, more harm against people. So it's like, it is a prideful thing. It's like, I don't want to make it seem like I'm, hiding myself or that this was a part of me or something. I have seen YouTubers that they're stubborn and they won't take down the video that they're apologizing for. And then it's like, the apology feels insincere because it's like the impact is still there. Like,
well, they talk about it being censorship, but it's not censorship if you're taking it down because you no longer agree with it.
Yeah, especially if you don't like the fact that you've upset people, you don't agree with it. I can understand that point. And actually, Paul brings up a point in relation to it, saying they might still be making money from old wrong content.
That's just immoral, though.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But that could be. It shows that their motivator is actually money above everything else, and it's not necessarily the case. I mean, we're not in their head. We don't know that. But if there's a popular video that they're refusing to delete, even though they think they probably should, because of the money aspect, it shows what's actually more important. Although I do think there are times when you can show, I've changed my views on this, and there are times when you can go, right, this is the way I used to think about this topic, but through these arguments and this evidence and that, this is the way I now think on it. And I think sometimes you can show a bit of growth, and that's not always a bad thing,
Delete the old video.
Exactly.
To the old video on your channel. So respond to it yourself. Go through it. You'll still be showing the video, but you've deleted the actual original, so people can't take you out of context, and you're actively responding to it and saying how you've grown as an individual. That's the best way to do it.
If you leave the old video up, to me, it's demonstrating that you don't actually understand the harm that you caused, because you're letting it continue.
That's fine. I mean, I think when I'm saying that I can understand changing of opinion on a topic, I agree. If you've actually genuinely caused harm, then you should remove the video. But if it's a less harmful topic,
right, of course,
I can understand wanting to keep it up there just to show people that, look, this was a position I had. These were my justifications for this position. However, this is my position now. These are my justifications, and that's why I don't agree with it anymore. But what you say as well, though, is actually redoing a brand new video, link it, and even setting that old video to private so you can reference it whenever you need to, but no one can actually see it, and doing a brand new video, even on that where you're not causing harm. It shows that actually you want people to come to this new video. You're not trying to promote this old video that is fully in the YouTube algorithm and keeps coming up and keeps sending people to your channel. You're actually trying to be more honest with your position and going, look, even if I don't get as many views for a while because I don't have a video that's in the YouTube algorithm, I'd still like to correct my position here and talk to you about it. So I can see what you're saying.
Sorry? The YouTube algorithm. People get addicted to like the YouTube, like it's like gambling almost. Like you don't know what video is going to give you that high and that views, and it's almost like they're so unwilling to part with it, you know. It sucks. It sucks that it's one of it's one of those things that literally feeds my depression when I get really like introspective and I'm just like, or do we all just, if we are given enough power, will we all just be shitty? Will we all just make the wrong decision? Like that's kind of what keeps me up at night. So you'll catch me having those conversations. I actually talk about that in my upcoming Attack on Titan video too. Just the hopelessness you can feel sometimes when you're faced with people in power. And you know, I guess what I have to remind myself is it's not that if given power, you will automatically abuse that power. It's people, I forget how it was said. There was a quote that I had read that really moved me one time, but I can't remember it word for word, so it's probably not going to have the same impact. But it was more like that. It's not like they just become bad people. It's like people that are already harmful and causing harm to the people around them in their small circles. Once they have power, they're going to take advantage of it, you know, and just kind of remembering that, because sometimes it does feel like it's just like inevitable or something. Like if you become powerful, then you're going to abuse it at some point. And maybe to some extent it is, because we're not perfect human beings. And when I make a mistake as a normal person, you know, I go and apologize. I mean, I don't know how to say, I'll say it like, but just as the average citizen, private person, I guess, you know, I go and apologize, I take accountability, I deal with it privately. When you make a mistake as a public figure, whether you be a YouTuber or a celebrity or a politician, politicians are a big one where I get really like, they're all corrupt. But it's like,
and they apologize. Oh well, if you feel like that, then I'm sorry that you feel like that thing happened. They don't actually apologize. They don't say, I'm sorry I did this. I'm sorry you feel this way about this thing. It's you know, right. They say it in such diplomatic language where they don't actually apologize for what they've done or take any accountability.
My favorite videos on YouTube at the moment are like 3 seconds long, and it's like described as like, it would be like this YouTube, it's like the only true parts of this YouTuber's apology video, and it's like literally says, please like, subscribe, or something like that. It's like, there's so many of them. It's really funny.
I hate it when they edit videos and they'll just leave like sometimes silence like means something. Like sometimes you can have silence where it's like, maybe I'm pausing to kind of make a facial expression to emphasize a point or something. But then they'll make apology videos and it's like, hey, here's like 20 seconds of me crying and going, or just like, you know, just like, it's like those emotions might be genuine. Like, I'm not saying they aren't. Sometimes they aren't, but like a lot of times they could be. But when you choose to edit a video and leave it in, and you're apologizing for maybe causing, like, because a lot of times it's like you're apologizing for being racist or something. And it's like, this is manipulative though. Like, and it's a manipulative in a bad way. I said before, you could be manipulative in a good way. For example, if somebody's a recovering addict and I'm trying to, you know, as somebody, I used to have, you know, an eating disorder back when I was in high school. If somebody was trying to manipulate me into getting help, that wouldn't be bad. You know, and you probably would have to do that because I mean, I saw my eating disorder as an addiction, and to me, it's like I was very manipulative, you know, back then, like extremely manipulative. So I think the only way you could have got through to me was by also manipulating me and guilt tripping me and making me feel bad for what I was doing, because I wasn't going to hear it any other way.
Yeah, it's the same thing. If you think about manipulations as well, just addressing that, you manipulate your kids sometimes for their betterment, to save them, because
exactly
they don't
to get them to eat their
necessarily
vegetables or something.
Yeah, they don't necessarily have a fully rational brain, and you know, sometimes they have to have things. I hate using the term dumbed down, but you know, simplified to a kid form, and you have to sometimes manipulate them into the right behavior. And over time, they can start understanding why that's actually how they should behave. But at a really young age, they can't necessarily behave it. So yeah, some manipulation can be good. especially for a good cause, especially if there is no other way to do it as well. And like you were saying, like if the only way you would get help is by someone manipulating you into getting help, then surely that's better than it not happening.
Exactly. And that's just kind of a harsh reality. And again, a part of the nuanced of the conversation that kind of gets skipped over sometimes, because even when I talk about people being manipulative, I'm talking about it in terms of emotional abuse. And sometimes people conflate manipulation with emotional abuse, and it's like that's not those two aren't, they can be interchangeable, but they're not always interchangeable. It depends on the conversation we're having.
More nuance. What are we ever going to do?
I think there's almost two words being used as well, isn't there? Like there's manipulation and then there's manipulation, right? Like, for instance, like the stuff that you were talking about, Joe, manipulating, technically it is manipulating your kids, but it's not in the sense that most people would use manipulation. Most people have that, define it as like a negative kind of abusive practice by somebody who doesn't have your best interest at heart, right?
Maybe it's good to recognize that nuance, though, because when you don't point it out and you just act like, well, that's not how maybe that's not how everyone uses it, then people kind of justify, then it's like this slippery slope where it's like, you're not manipulating your kid to eat their vegetables. Suddenly, you're manipulating them into, I don't know, believing that God exists or they're going to burn in hell. Where does the line end? And I think having the distinction and being able to recognize that some manipulation is okay and knowing that is technically what it is, we're able to combat it. Because otherwise people are just going to be like, well, you say manipulation is wrong, but I do it when I do this and it's not wrong then, is it? So we have to be able to include the nuance, I think. I get what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just thinking like, if we don't include the nuance, then that kind of provides them more of a, I guess, leeway or feel more combative in that, well, they're right and you're wrong, because you're not acknowledging that not all manipulation is technically abusive.
I think it's going to come down to how you define the terms ultimately at the end of the day, right? Because if, as
always
Luke
a
said,
argument.
Yeah, if as Luke said, manipulation is not having the persons that you're manipulating interest at heart, then I think you're going to be able to draw the line pretty successfully. Even when you say stuff about religion, the example that you mentioned, right? Like the parents presumably still think that they're doing the right thing for their kids when they're doing that. So that wouldn't count as manipulation under the definition that Luke provided. But I think I agree that it ultimately doesn't matter if you like to talk about manipulation and define it as manipulation. And have the conversation within that word, or if you want to separate it, I think that's just a
fair
semantic thing.
Yeah, no, it is. I was just kind of just speaking from what thoughts that pop in my head.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon says she ties manipulation to deceptive or emotionally abusive actions to get someone to behave in your desired way. But in some respects, you can deceive your kids. You're not necessarily being emotionally abusive to get them to behave in your desired way. So I'd say it is a form of manipulation. And
it's all about perception.
And I think you can have a really basic definition of manipulation that is basically just getting someone to the behavior to change in a clever or unconspicuous way.
I actually think her separation of manipulation and influence is a good way of separating those two, because influencing someone is kind of similar, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think that's a really good way of separating those, because
influence still allows them to fully make...
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to say. Like,
that would be the thing. That would be different, right?
What's the difference? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
It's not deceptive. Influencing someone, you're not being well,
then it goes back into being manipulation. Though I think influence.
No, I don't agree with you.
Is genuinely just sort of trying to positive, like trying to influence
As a
someone's
magician,
opinion.
I don't agree with you. There's loads of things I do to influence.
But all of that
people.
is manipulation, Luke.
It's not manipulation.
Yeah,
No,
well, it
there's
is.
loads of
No,
stuff that I do to
complete
influence
manipulation.
people's perception of what I'm doing in a deceptive way. It's exactly what I'm
You're
doing.
manipulating our minds. That's it.
See, and Philip, I know you do you agree with me with that on that, Philip? I wouldn't say I manipulate people when I'm doing magic tricks. I'd say I'm influencing them.
That's a good question.
To perceive
That's a
it,
good
and it is
question.
deceptive.
I'm not, I think manipulation would be a subset of influence at that point, right? And if that's the case, then I'm not sure. It depends. Again, it depends on the definition. But this feels to me like a semantic.
It is,
right.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if you know what people are saying,
I think there is the negative.
Have you been to Answers and Reason? Have you ever come on this show before, Philip?
I've been on a couple of times. Yeah. The point is but when I talk about the definition of atheism, I have what I think are good reasons that sit outside of the pure semantics of why I prefer one definition over the other. Right? I think there are good ways to think about when it matters to talk about definitions and when it doesn't. Right? Because a lot of people, for example, right, a lot of people will say that arguing about definitions is completely useless, right? But I think there are a couple of ways that you can see arguments about definitions being useful in certain ways. For example, right, when a definition is being used to influence the actual content of what people think about a specific thing or how they think about a specific thing, I think then it matters to talk about definitions, right? Because then it's not about just labeling, then it's about, how the majority of people are going to think about a specific topic, right? And if the definition has the power to influence that thinking, the underlying thinking, right, then it's worth talking about definitions. And I'm not sure if this...
their underlying thinking.
I'm not sure if this distinction here between manipulation and influence is such a case. Maybe it is, and if it is, then it matters.
Can I push back and try to make a point? I think the reason why it could matter here is because what we talked about earlier with, oh no, my brain just sort of is disappearing. My thoughts are just leaving my ears right now. Hold on. Sorry.
Yeah, that happens. No worries.
Slowly felt myself forget.
Yeah.
What was I saying? We were talking. Sorry, this happens on live streams.
Yeah, no worries.
We were talking about how having.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry. It disappeared. It just left. It's
by
gone.
Manipulation.
Somebody else make a comment, and then if I remember it, I'm gonna think about it.
Can I say my view on why it might be important?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think it might be important because in cases of abuse, it's clear language that then can be used to describe something that has occurred to somebody without there being a watered down version that can then be used to kind of be implanted in its stead, right? So if as a general group of people we say manipulation can be positive and manipulation can be quite horribly destructive, right? If I then said to you, I've been manipulated by Joe, that could mean one of two things, right? Again, yeah.
Yeah.
That could mean anything, right? So I think for me, if I do think that if we've started using manipulation in this quite damaging way, it's quite a damaging thing, and we talk about it in the context of abuse. In the context of abuse, I do think that it's necessary to only hold that one definition of it.
I think I absolutely agree with you.
Because you reminded me. You reminded me what I was going to say, so thank you. I was going to say, I think the validity of people, for one, what you said about abuse, that's when it becomes important. But I think this distinction with semantics, to me, I was thinking about, I think there has to be some validity provided for why we manipulate and what the purpose of it is, which comes down to that basic definition, so that people can understand the context of it, I guess is what I'm saying. Because otherwise, when it comes to situations where you're either, if you're talking about the extreme of emotional abuse, or maybe just kind of teetering where it's like you don't think this person's horrible, but they're kind of hurting somebody by manipulating them, even though they think they're doing a good thing. Kind of letting them understand why they're doing what they're doing and why, in this case, the manipulation is hurting somebody. I don't know. I guess that's kind of why semantics could matter, because otherwise I see it feels like a lot of times people will shut down what you're saying because they push back on this. Well, it's not bad in this case, or they're just doing what they think is right. And then it's like, the conversation's like forced on you without you addressing it, because people are going to excuse it on the basis of, well, you're not talking about this type of manipulation, or something like that, I guess, is kind of what I see. And you see that a lot, I think, with what Luke was talking about, abuse survivors talking about emotional abuse, because the impact of emotional abuse, especially over long term, is always like just kind of pushed under the rug, and not, especially when it happens between two adults, it's not really like validated in the way that it should be, because of the impact that it has. And I say that before anyone pushes back. As a physical abuse survivor, I absolutely hate it when people use us to be like, how insulting is it that you're saying this is abuse when people experience this? I'm like, shut up. Like, you have no idea what it's like to have that dynamic of physical abuse. The things that I don't remember being in pain. I don't remember what it's like to hurt. I remember the manipulation. I remember the gaslighting. I remember feeling invalidated. Like, the biggest side effects of my PTSD, it's not, and not to say that it can't be, because it can. Physical abuse can have the same side effects. But there's such a large impact that is solely based on the emotional abuse. I'm sorry, I got a little dark again, but the impact of that, I feel like it has to be a part of the conversation, I guess.
I definitely agree with you there. Actually, thinking on this definition thing just a little bit more, I think we should move on from the semantics quite quickly. But
let's talk about atheism.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm not going to go into that. But as you guys know, I prefer clear and concise terminology. I may not be prescriptive with my labels, but when it comes to like the non-theist conversation, I like individual labels for specific thoughts and feelings, rather than regarding them all as the same thing. But people can use whatever term they want for themselves. I don't care about it that much. It's their identity after all. So coming back to this abuse thing, this manipulation thing. Now, if you're genuinely deceiving your kids, let's just say your child is doing something incredibly naughty, and the only way you can mitigate this behavior is by outright deceiving them. You're telling them horrible lies that are not to the point where they're emotionally abusive, but you are telling them lies to get them to fall in line until they reach a point when they're a little bit older and they can actually have the conversation and understand why you should behave in the correct way. Is that not manipulation? Because it's...
As a really childhood educator, I'm having a hard time thinking of a situation where you can outright lie to them and it not like.
If you step on cracks, a bear's going to come out and eat you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that tips into the realms of emotional abuse, though.
A little bit, depending on how it impacts you. Yeah. Well, the thing I'm thinking of, in order to, you don't have to say these, because when I'm thinking of lying, I'm thinking of like, be good or you're not going to get presents from Santa Claus, and even that can have like an impact that you aren't prepared for. It's part of the reason why I'm terrified to freaking have kids, because it's so easy to say something that it's like 12 seconds to say the sentence, and it's like it never leaves their brain.
Yeah.
And the thing is, sorry, I'm having a little trouble focusing again. I lost it. It's gone. Sorry. My ADHD is kicking in.
This is also half of our stream as well, Brina.
I've been doing this for a minute.
No, I mean,
Um,
I mean, this is what we normally do as well. Don't worry.
Okay. All
You're in good
right.
company in that sense. Of losing train of thought.
Yeah.
Wait. The impact we were talking about.
The impact of lying is what you were saying.
Redirection. So as an early childhood educator, the alternative to lying is going to be redirecting them. And I don't know if there's a situation where I could see. So like, for example, if you have toddlers and your siblings and this toddler goes up and they're like, I'm going to knock down the tower that you're building. You redirect them. You don't maybe don't have to lie to them. I don't know. I guess I'm just having trouble thinking there probably is one. I'm wondering what situation there could be where we would need to lie, because a lot of the lies I think that parents tell their kids are things like, if you swallow your gum, it's going to stay in your stomach for 7 years. Or,
they might not even be lying themselves there because they believe it to be true. Yeah. It's just a falsehood that they're passing on. And
I thought of one that might be beneficial, actually. Yeah? The lie about if you touch a baby bird or like a baby bunny, then the mom won't come back to it. That's not true, but that would be beneficial because it does actually get the kids to stop. If they find a baby rabbit or a baby bird, to leave it alone, because then they have that emotional tool of, if I do this, the mom's not going to come back and it could die. Yeah. And that's technically not true, but it's for the benefit of the kid not to be touching wild animals.
I think there's other ones that you could say that they're maybe not necessarily lies, but they're exaggerations you might tell your kid just to, if they won't put their coat on, or if they try and run into the road, or they won't calm down. You're not necessarily gonna...
That's true.
You're not necessarily lying to them, because you know what? If you do go out without your coat and it's below zero, you could get very ill. But parents often have to exaggerate for their kids, because if you go, well, look, you might get really ill, darling. Especially if it's a young child, they'll just be like, no. Like
you'll catch a cold if you don't put your coat on.
Whereas if you go, you could die! And they're like, oh my God, well, I don't want that to happen, so I'll put my coat on.
If you have sex, you'll die. That's what I'm thinking of.
I definitely think that when your kids do get to a point where they can start processing things and their executive function kicks in and all of that, that you don't have to do these things, but I do think there are times when children are younger that, do you know what, you might be lucky and you never have to do it with your kid, and you can always explain things or redirect them certain ways. But I think that all kids are very different, and some are very, very, very headstrong, and you might have tried the best path, and that's not worked. So for this particular child, you might have had to have said, right, you can't do this because of that, and it's corrected the behavior, and you have every intention of, when they're a bit older, recorrecting that and saying, look, I exaggerated there. But I mean, it's just a hypothetical, but by doing this, you are actively deceiving them to correct a behavior. It is for their benefit. I would say that it's a form of manipulation, but I
think we're talking about two different words here. The same word, different word.
Yeah, it's got a very different context.
Keep happening.
I think you're right that it's got a very different context, but I don't think influence suits it either. I don't think. I think an influence, you can influence someone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're deceiving them. I think
you can influence someone deceptively. Think about advertising.
But I'd say that's manipulation.
Advertising is manipulation, though, isn't it?
Right. But that's what I'm saying. It's a synonym. It's a synonym because it can influence you. It does influence you.
Yeah, but then there would be...
If it's a synonym, then we are just literally arguing semantics.
No, it's not a synonym, but we could say that it's a subset, right? And in that case, it would be both on a larger scale, influence and manipulation as a part of the smaller subset.
Manipulation is a form of of influence.
Yeah, exactly, right. So if you're saying that that's manipulation, you're saying that's also influencing it. But if you're saying that you're influencing it,
you're
it's
not necessarily
manipulating.
I'll go with that.
So
And then
they're
you
not
can
always
break down
manipulating
different
something.
types of manipulation from within that as well, if you so wish.
do
You
think-
could have a negative and positive manipulation if you so wish to do. And by positive manipulation, it's because there's a positive result and you're eventually going to correct that,
But
rather
I
than
guess
an abusive kind.
my concern is conflation in this situation.
Yes, and I agree that can happen, and I think we've circled back round to the point that you made earlier, and I think you're right, and it's one of those things where you have to be clear and precise with the language you're using, especially when there is a polysemous nature to a particular word, and stipulate how you are using it if you're aware that there are different uses to a word. So if I'm talking. We're now aware. If I say, talking about manipulating a child to bring about a positive behavior, I'm not talking about this other kind of manipulation. But how do you convey that to someone that you're speaking to, or someone speaking about manipulation isn't fully understanding?
It's also hard because most people manipulate their kids with that same intent, but the problem is we disagree about what's positive.
Yeah, and from the result and the method, some people do go to the point where they're abusive with their methods of manipulations of their children. Whereas
soap in the mouth.
I've had that.
We've both had that, and we're totally fine. Totally stable. It's okay. I'm totally for that. I'm being sarcastic. Please don't put saucers in your kid's mouth.
Moving on from that.
Sorry, I derailed your thoughts.
No. I was just remembered we were doing comments from the chat, so I'm still quite far behind.
How long ago were we doing comments from the chat, Joe?
Kimo brings up a point about it's even worse. People can clip and use old comments to fuel some wacky narrative. Now, this is something that we do see happen, especially people with big channels that have hate for other big channels. They can sometimes take either old comments and clips that they may have since retracted and clip them out and fuel the fire by saying, look, they said this one thing and they said that one thing. And you see this sort of behavior happen with between bigger YouTube channels that dislike each other for a particular reason. So, I mean, how do you get around that? Because if they have deleted the original video, right, but someone has taken clips and now is presenting it out of context and saying they said this thing, this thing, this thing, how do they prove that that's not actually how the conversation went?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on... Ooh, that's a rough one. Because I think overall the best thing, depending on what it was, the best thing could be to delete it. But it's like, most people aren't going to be preemptively thinking about how somebody's going to use it against them, and they're not going to screenshot it. I think the best thing with YouTube videos on the YouTube sphere is I would just like private it. Like I wouldn't completely delete it, especially because being a YouTuber, being a content creator, if somebody were to ever it's more likely that somebody could come after you for that. So I think when you step into that sphere of a creator, I think that's where you have to be more aware of like, okay, I want to delete this, but also I should probably have a backup of it, maybe make a folder or something. I think that would probably be in the benefit of any YouTube creator, because we're not really private persons when it comes to that extent, and people are going to have more of a drive to advance search our Twitter history and overanalyze every single YouTube video. And sometimes it's justified, and sometimes it's not. And if you want to be able to say your side of things, you gotta be able to have the receipts. Otherwise, people just aren't going to believe you. That's just how the internet's going to work. I don't know. That is a rough one. I mean, I think also pointing out when people are editing videos, it's usually pretty obvious too that somebody's like cutting in between sentences and stuff, but not always. I mean, you see it in political ads all the time.
Most
There
definitely.
was a debate that Matt Dillahunty had with Cy Bruggencate.
You
Oh
finally
my
brought
God,
him
it's-
up. I was wondering
Well, no,
when
this
his
is
name was
actually-
going to get mentioned.
Yeah, I've seen that. It was
Oh my
terrible.
God,
Oh, it was
cuts
so
out
bad.
so many quotes out of context of
Yeah.
Matt Dillahunty and basically makes him argue himself, and it's the most stupid debate tactic I've ever seen in my life. Because Matt, and we have issues with some of Matt's arguments and stuff, and some of other stuff I don't know. But basically, in that situation, Matt was very easily when I changed my belief around that idea really soon after that. I apologized to that guy. Blah blah blah. Basically broke it all down, and it just ended up being it backfired on Cyborg and Kate massively because it was just loads of out of context kind of quotes. It was really
and
bad.
we're leading more into dangerous territory with that, with the way technology is advancing. I mean, we have if being able to create somebody's voice becomes more accessible to people who aren't really tech savvy, we're gonna have some problems there.
Yeah, it might bring back
Not
people
only the
having
voice.
to go in to see things in person though.
Sorry, what?
Might bring back people having to go see things in person in order to make sure that
Yeah, but that's only half the issue, right? Because it's not about looking at someone and thinking about what they're saying. It's also about seeing something online and thinking that that's what they're actually advocating for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I actually go on, Philip.
I just want to, if someone deep fakes your image and your voice, right, and then makes you say stuff, it's a bit hard to counter that, especially if it goes.
Well, that's why they need to legislate for it now. Like, what they're going to do is they're going to legislate for it when it's an issue.
Yeah, but it's
like legislating for it already.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think we need some more legislation when it comes to internet and how this, because we have so many people
Wild West
and our politicians that are just no idea what the hell is going on the computer, and it's we need some more regulation here. I don't feel like it should just be up to private businesses at this point. It's becoming too much of a necessity in our society and the damage that we can do. I mean, just even as a creator and where I live, when I was getting cyber stalked, and I probably still am, I don't have a whole lot of if I go up to the police station and try to explain what's happening, they're literally just going to laugh at me. There isn't these methods that I have in my city where it's they understand what's happening. And how to combat it. There's not these more regulation in to really protect us from those types of abuses, because the people in power are out of their depth when it comes to this.
Yeah, but it's also really hard to regulate for these types of things because that's
also true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard to see. I mean, I have a hard time seeing how you could effectively stop that. I guess you could.
Well, I actually know who they are. So I fully know who they are. But even in that extent, it's it's not somebody who's in my town that lives in this city, and it just makes things so complicated to even figure out what to do, because there's certain regulations and stuff because they're not here.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It is difficult. There are a lot of different elements to it that make it really difficult to regulate. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. It was fine. I actually was finished with my point, so.
Yeah, I don't know how to legislate for it, but they should.
I have a notepad here, and I've been writing things down so that when people are talking and I think of something, I'm okay, I'm not going to forget it this time.
I've got one of those too.
I don't interrupt
except
yes.
I've randomly.
Is it
just
only us two that have them? Because I think this is an ADHD thing. If it's just us, when somebody's talking, I need to be able to. If I have a notepad, I can write it down.
I normally do that.
I won't interrupt, and it does. It probably would help everyone else too, so that I don't feel the urge to interrupt, but I can also go back to my point. Otherwise, it's just going to fly away, and it's.
Although sometimes, even though you've written it down, sometimes the conversation has moved so far away you can't actually come back to it.
Yeah, it feels.
Because,
yeah.
Like I've got one on my notepad about quote tweeting, because I was going to talk about an experience that I'd had with that, and the dynamic that comes from people quote tweet. I've segued into it, so I'm going to go into it now. But
That
at
was
the
a
time,
very clever way to segue.
but we were talking about quote tweeting earlier, and there is this sort of power dynamic, especially by someone who's got a lot of followers, that quote tweets someone and basically leaves a derogatory comment. Now, I've had this happen before where especially in conversations about either morality, beliefs, knowledge, or the definition of atheism, and where I've been saying that there are multiple definitions of atheism and agnostic. These are my preferred ones, but you know they're all valid, and people who are saying them wrong, or it's always been this particular definition are wrong. And I've been quote tweeted and misrepresented because they've just taken like one tweet out of the conversation. And obviously their followers haven't actually gone and read the thread or anything like that. They've come in with the opinion that this person has read the thread and is telling them the truth. So even though the evidence is there that I'm not saying what they're saying I'm saying, their straw man essentially of what I have said has influenced all these people against me. And in general, it doesn't, you can't turn that round because they're on this person's side to start with. And everything that you say from there is like, oh, whoa, whoa. Once I have actually managed to turn one of these situations round and have them go, oh, so you're not actually saying that? And I was like, no, I never said that. If you go and read the actual thread, I don't say that. I do have a preferred use, but I'm saying there's multiple uses. They've just decided to take this out of context. And they go, oh, I didn't realize that this person did that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah. And it's one of the reasons I actually hate quote tweeting unless it's a positive quote tweet. I try not to do it. I did it at the beginning of Twitter. You can find me doing it all the time. You know, I demonstrated a number of negative behaviors that I do my best. Yeah, reply to the person.
I've done that a lot of times too.
Quote tweet someone if you think that there's something that it's something good, something you can learn from, or if you're genuinely wanting to express your agnosticism towards the topic and actually have people go argue for and against it directly with you rather than carrying on in a messy thread. I do sometimes understand the quote tweet if someone is persistently misrepresenting you or something like that and trying to get some engagement from people to go, can you find some other way to explain to this person that is not what I'm saying and they're not listening to me. But in general, I'd go for the positive quote tweet rather than the negative one.
I had a similar experience. Sorry, Brina.
Oh, go ahead. No, you're fine.
I had a similar experience with that Rene guy. Do you remember when I was talking about the book, Why I'm No Longer
German
Talking
one
to White People About Race?
Yes, yeah.
And he was like, what if she, like, he kept taking my tweets out of context and saying that, like, you know, this person is racist and stuff, and I was trying to explain to him in a tweet, which is really fucking difficult, why it's not racist and what the book's about.
Yeah.
And he got very angry at me, and it was very kind of like, inappropriate, and slightly racist. It was just frustrating, but it's a similar thing, you know. He just kept taking individual things that he'd pick out like the first half of a tweet thread that I'd have. So I'd have 1 and 2 after it for each bit to make sure that, you know, people knew it was part of a thread rather than just one tweet on its own. But he'd just tweet that one thing out of context. Very annoying. And then I'd start responding to that thread, and then it gets messy because you're then responding to different threads, different quotes. Oh, it just becomes an absolute mess.
I also hate when people when they are conversing on Twitter, they just quote tweet each other in a chain.
Yes,
it's also really funny to me. And
when they quote tweet themselves,
when they're like fighting or debating.
Yeah, you can't follow the conversation.
Every time someone responds, like when someone responds to the quote tweet and they quote tweet that, right, and then he responds again, and then they quote tweet that, and
right.
Like, it's such
the only purpose of the quote tweet at that point is to
rally
because
people.
You're panicking, even if you're in the right, and you could be in the right, but you're you're panicking and you're feeling defensive and upset
Yeah,
and hurt, and you need that, you're craving that validation because
Yeah.
you've been
From other people.
shat on,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that it's natural. But yeah, I think it comes down to that emotional regulation. And unfortunately, once you step into the sphere of a creator, even when you're teeny tiny, you have this responsibility that just wasn't there before. And it's hard to be like, just be able to like, oh, I'm just expressing my emotions, I have every right to do this. And now it's like, okay, I'm also expressing my emotions and I have every right to do this, but there are a lot bigger consequences in the air than there were before, and that has to be taken into account. And maybe like kind of the method that I kind of go about is, if somebody really upsets me, in a conversation I had on Twitter or something, just stop engaging. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting topic, let's talk about it in a YouTube video. I don't need to talk about the person that pissed me off, but I can talk about the topic and sort of get my opinions out that way, versus just continuing this chain of being really petty on Twitter and quote tweeting each other, back
That
and
would have
forth.
been
Like,
very good advice a couple of weeks ago.
Joe, you do that with articles, don't you?
Yes, I quite often write an article. So if someone pisses me off, I get to a point where I actually stop writing it and I write an article. Sometimes I will include what they've said, but take out their name. Unless it's a big content creator who's publicly, it's a well-known view.
And that's totally fair too,
Because
then they're a public creator and you're not in the power in that situation.
But in general, I will anonymize the results so that there's hopefully no bias there, so someone can read the article. We do sometimes address certain things on our videos as well, or we might address it in the short. So one of the things that I like to do is address some of our bad memes and misrepresented thoughts. By our, I mean us atheists. So I might not address the person directly, but I will do, I might have some of the comments in some of those mini videos and stuff as well, because I think it's worth addressing it, and it's worth, when we were talking about like the atheist community one, the number of people who have said, I've never heard anyone claim that there's no atheist community. And I went, right, check this. And I just showed them a block of tweets, all anonymized, of people saying there's no atheist community. And it's just like, right, there you go. There are people that are saying it, and then I went on with the actual conversation and justification of how there is multiple different atheist communities, even if there isn't one local to you. And actually,
that's a good way to address your anger too, instead of conversing, because you're actually having a positive influence. If you go back and you're like writing a blog or you're creating a video, you have a way to actually create a positive influence and actually also get all of your thoughts out in a concise way, to where you have something to point to when you are misconstrued. You're like, okay, that's not how I feel, I said it here. At the very least, it doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't always work. They have to read it.
At least
they have to read it or watch it, and sometimes they don't.
But at least you can feel satisfied and that you presented yourself correctly, and you can't be responsible for how other people are presenting you, because you gave yourself the opportunity to actually have that, platform to get all of that out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but it can also be the ultimate sort of power dynamic play if you're not careful, right? Because you have the opportunity to publish a video and you have an audience, and you, Joe, have the opportunity to write an article and you have an audience, and the other person that you're conversing with might not have that, right? So that creates a disparity in the means that you have to argue. So I think it's important, as you do, Joe, to anonymize.
I was going to say that's kind
if there is, exactly, right, like to counter to balance that, right? Because if there's someone that is bigger than you, then I think it's fine to point who it is.
And that's actually a mistake I made on my mental health.
There's a responsibility with viewers, though, that they sometimes like to ignore, because it's like, we can try to be as self-aware as we can, doing this, but also anybody has the ability. I mean, taking away like different privileges amongst poverty and stuff like that. But if you have the computer, if you're on Twitter, you likely have the ability to create a platform or make a blog or do videos.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a responsibility that sometimes is ignored when you get to hide behind a keyboard and say whatever you want to say and think that they don't have the right to publicly reprimand you for doing that, you know? I mean, it kind of, it's a double-edged sword, I think,
Yeah.
because I can see a responsibility on our end to try to make sure we're not taking advantage, but there are nuances to where it's like something happens, and take a shot every time I say nuances. When something happens and it can feel justified, like if somebody is outright attacking you and hurting you and, you know, saying horrible things, like it's also not fair to completely blame a creator if they react emotionally, because sometimes those emotions are justified and they have a right to be pissed off and angry and to act irrationally by, you know, letting out their feelings on Twitter if that's what they needed to do at that time, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know.
I mean, Shannon has said the same thing about what one of her friends does as well, along the anonymizing thing, saying that my friend Katie screen captures and hides the identity, and maybe that's a better way, because she just admitted before that saying, I'm totes guilty of quote tweeting jerks. And I think, you know, it depends. I mean, if you were to say an equally big creator as you, I think that maybe there's some fairness in doing the quote tweeting thing, because, you know, there is the balance there. But let's just say if you were to do it to some random bloke that was being a complete bellend but only has, say, 5 followers or whatever, you know, drawing that attention and that hate to them probably isn't worth doing. It's probably better to leave the conversation if they're not open to rationality. And, you know, as you say, screen capture, hide the identity, and address why that particular comment is bad.
That's why I was okay with sharing Sarah Salviander's Twitter and her name and stuff, because she has like 20,000 followers, and I had like at that time like 200.
I mean, that's completely fair.
You know,
yeah.
So I was happy with that, and then there's like other people who have similar. I think there's someone I'm thinking of specifically, Philip, who are like, I'm a small content creator. You're using my image and stuff, and it's like, dude, you're a bigger content creator than us. You have more followers than us. What are you chatting about? You know, and it's just like his perspective on that individual's particularly perspective on how big a content creator is compared to like the people who are kind of disagreeing with him. Is skewed because he thinks of himself as a small content creator and therefore not.
We have actually overtaken him now, though. Speaking of that,
did we?
Yeah,
have we?
Yeah. I mean, when it came out, I think we only had about like 100 subs, but yeah, we've overtaken him now.
So now, if I was to name and shame him, it wouldn't be appropriate. But,
No.
but back then, it was absolutely appropriate. And, you know, he's talking publicly. This is the thing, though. Like, if people are on a similar level to you guys, to you, and they're talking publicly about stuff, those thoughts are public, and people should be aware that they could be publicly discussed. Right?
Yeah.
That's one part of it, and then I guess it's just about, you know, going back to the power dynamic stuff that we were talking about earlier, the impact. So if your impact is going to be really massive on that individual, it's disproportionate to their like for instance, when I tweeted about the mental health thing, I shared the person. They have more followers than me, so I shared their name and stuff. And I thought I'm only going to get a few responses because literally none of my other threads have ever taken off like that, right? And then that one just took off, and I felt bad. I was like, "Oh dear!" Like I didn't retweet it, but I shared their name, and I was just like, you know, what if people are going over there and like being like, "You're an idiot" or whatever, and I'd feel really bad about that. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. My brain's kind of.
Well, I mean, what you're saying there though is that even in the situation where someone is bigger than you, that sometimes if you don't actually want to draw the attention to them in that regard, if you don't think it would have a positive impact to do so, if you don't think that it could actually help change their mind with other people, you know,
It was the
influencing
argument I
them.
wanted to isolate, so I probably should have just isolated the argument.
Yeah, and I think in general,
Yeah.
I mean, even though we've said, it's probably acceptable when they are a much bigger creator than yourself, even still, it's kind of like the argument is more important than the actual person making the argument. And maybe they'll see the responses to you addressing the argument, even though you've done it anonymously, and maybe they won't get so defensive because their name hasn't been brought into it, and they might be willing to listen. Maybe they'll even delete their original comment because they've then changed their mind.
Just gonna say that the way you address people that you disagree with, depending on the situation and the context, obviously, I think it could also have an impact on your audience, the people that you're attracting, what behaviors they find acceptable. Because if you are not, bringing all this attention or coming down on a person, especially somebody smaller than you, and belittling them, then maybe they won't do that either. Because I think we're going to attract people that exhibit behaviors that either we already have, or people that are going to start to exhibit the behaviors that we have because, they're watching our content. And I think that creators are not, I tweeted about this earlier, creators are not responsible for every individual person. If one person goes and harasses somebody, that's not like your responsibility. But I do think it's telling if you go into like a video and go look at a creator's comments and just see what the dynamic is there. Because when it's just dogpiling people, making fun of their looks, their weight, making fun of their identity or gender or sexuality, like there's a problem there. And it's like, how are you attracting this audience? And I think that's something we have to ask ourselves if that were to ever happen, and make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable for what we may be doing that is attracting people like that, or people that are, because there's a huge difference between, say, Jimmy Snow's audience, for example, and Gabby Hanna's. Two people that I don't really like. I've been public about that. Don't agree with. But I don't think Jimmy Snow's audience is going to react the same way that, say, Gabby Hanna's will when she talks about somebody she doesn't like. And that has to do with her and how she presents herself. And what the influence she has and the audience that she's built. It's completely different. So I do think how we behave is in some ways, impacting our audience and what they do with that.
Yeah, I wonder though, if the argument is that we shouldn't sort of talk about people that have less social influence or opportunity to respond on an equal scale, because they might get dogpiled, right? They might see your fans getting on their tweet or their post and just shit them, and then they'll feel like shit and stuff like that. But if that's the argument, if that's the type of reasoning as to why we shouldn't do that, is it okay to make a video and reveal their name, but like explicitly make clear that whoever sees this video shouldn't do that?
Yeah, I think
shouldn't behave that way. Is that sort of mitigating?
It's not mitigating it. It's trying to mitigate your responsibility in regard to it, but people are still going to do it. I mean, in fact, if you outright tell someone not to do something, you are going to get them to do it. Everybody, right now, don't think of pink elephants. Don't think of pink elephants. Right?
I think there are situations, what Philip's talking about, where it is okay. For example, if somebody is hurting you, is like somebody dangerous.
So I was actually going to bring that up.
What you need to be clear though is, like, if you're mentioning their name, the account that you're mentioning, is it attached? Like, make sure you're not doxing somebody, basically, because that is extremely dangerous. It is extremely alarming how easy it is. You literally, if you have someone's name, you have their address. If you have their address, you have their name. That's how easy it is, and it is extremely dangerous. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that you need to make sure at the very minimum that you're doing.
Yeah,
I think tone is really important in that, though. Like, the tone of your portrayal of it. So if I went onto a video, and I said, guys, don't go over to Shannon Q's. I'm saying it because she's in the chat. Shannon Q's channel and have a go at her for her, this latest tweet or whatever, but it's pretty stupid and dumb and stuff like that. That's not gonna discourage it. But if I go, I don't agree with this because of this, this, and this, and actually break it down and have it in a respectful and meaningful way and educational tone, I think that will actually mitigate it, because you're not trying to draw attention to it to demonstrate how stupid it is. You're trying to draw attention to it to demonstrate, this is why I disagree with this.
Yeah, I think you've got something right there as well. Yeah, the presentation, not just saying don't go and do this, but it's dumb. I think you're very right there. Also, I mean, would it be fair to maybe retweet or quote tweet someone that was actually dangerous? So, say if someone's just wrong or a bit of an idiot, we don't want them dogpiled, we don't want them to suffer any abuse, so on and so forth. But if actually someone's dangerous, maybe they're out there trying to do something naughty to young children, they're trying to something like that, just think of something nasty that they're doing online that they're for some reason having some sort of public conversation about. In that instance,
or even if they're harassing you, like if they're just cyber harassing you, I think you have a right to call attention to that. They could potentially be doing it to other people, and maybe their account needs to be taken down.
So in regard to that, you'd agree that there are times that maybe the public approach is the best method, even if we would say that maybe it should, in general, as a general rule, be the last resort.
Well, I think
there's
a difference between disagreeing with someone's opinion and them being a potential offender. Like everyone has a responsibility to call out and to report potentially offending behavior. That's my view, anyway. So yeah, I think that if you think something is happening that's illegal, and you want to make it public, like the Don't Fuck with Cats series is a really good example of where that works.
I've seen that.
Right? Because, but that the authorities didn't listen to those people, and then someone ends up getting killed because of it. I think that if you just disagree with someone, then that's very different. That's a very different thing than there being a potential offence happening.
I'd agree there. Guys, I've just noticed the time, and I do have work tomorrow.
Me too.
Yeah. So, it's half 12 here, and I'm definitely going to need to get something to eat before I go to bed as well. So I think that if there's any questions or comments that want to come in from the channel, I'd very much like them to come in now, please, and I'll do my best to read them out. And also, guys, do you have anything else that you'd like to cover off briefly, or something that you'd like to discuss with us in the future along the lines of this topic? Start with you, Brina.
The only thing I can think of, it's been something that I've been thinking about talking about for a while now, which kind of falls into power dynamics, but more of the nefarious forms where it becomes illegal, is I think I see an issue with maybe not for you guys because we live in different countries, but the consent, the laws around consent. I see issues with the idea that up until a person turns 18, suddenly it's legal and people act like it's nothing wrong with it. And I think we're having more nuanced conversations around, does that make sense? Does it make sense that a 17-year-old,
a 16-year, so that would be an interesting discussion.
Right, or like having a 16-year-old being illegal, I guess, and then and it being wrong, and then the moment that they turn whatever age that they would need to turn, they can be preyed on by maybe that 40-year-old who's just been waiting for them to turn 18. You know, I mean, and there's a lot of issues when it comes to, I mean, you guys might have heard of it if you watched the video that I posted today when it comes to America and the laws that we have and the ways that we can get around consent with minors. It's concerning. And I think there should be more nuanced conversation around that. But
that'd
so
definitely
yeah,
be
that
an
would, I guess,
interesting
be
one
the only thing.
to talk about in the future, actually. But I definitely think that would be a can of worms to start having that conversation now. I don't think we would do it justice if we tried to.
Yeah, exactly.
squeeze it
That's
in.
why I haven't brought it up, because it's like that's a whole nother. I mean, then you're getting into really serious stuff.
But I'd love to have that conversation in the future, and I think it would be definitely interesting because the law is generally different over here to how it is in America, and it differs from state to state in America as well, and from here to certain places in Europe. I don't know if the law's changed, but I remember one of when we used to do like French exchanges and things like that, the age of consent was something like 12, or at least that's what they said it was. I never verified it, but it's
France.
Yeah. It also brings up minors, like what is legal, like we have cases of like 16-year-olds dating 12-year-olds, and it's like something doesn't seem right about that. We should be able to do something about that. There's such nuance to it, and I think it comes down to, I mean, not to go on a spiel, but to me it just comes down to I think those laws are there to protect predators and not to protect potential victims.
But love is love, man. Yeah.
Another issue. Yeah. The idea of soulmates, but we're soulmates. They're the one for me. That's why it's okay.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll leave that one there, and we will definitely come to that in the future because I would love to have that conversation. Luke, what about you? Other than announcing your video tomorrow, which you're more than welcome to do.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could do that. So, guys, I am streaming tomorrow at 8 p.m. GMT. It's going to be a follow-up for. It's not a response or anything to a video made by Shannon Key yesterday about her experiences with grief and without God. I'm going to be following that up and discussing my views on that, and I think. Doesn't change my views in any way, but she's made me change maybe the approach that I'm going to take. Because I have a video out on about bereavement already. So if you are going to watch that, please watch Shannon's video first. I think that'll be really good. It's extremely powerful. But in terms of what I would want to discuss with you guys in the future, I'm really interested in this morality of charity concept, because I think that on the surface it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, well obviously charity is immoral, but I think that we can get into loads of different like kind of nooks and crannies about it and actually kind of like tear it apart a little bit and probably have some disagreements, which is always great because that's how we get more nuanced views. So I would love to have that discussion with you guys.
Yeah, sounds good. Philip?
Yeah, I just want to debate Luke on the morality of putting pineapple on pizza at some point. Because that's just, yeah, it bothers me and it keeps me up at night. So
My favorite pizza is sriracha, shrimp, pineapple, and it's amazing.
Okay, so include Brina in that debate as well.
we can literally do a debate between Brina, me, and then Philip and Dave. Joe, you can host it.
You guys are just boring. No creativity. You just think it has to be one thing.
Answer Reason's first debate. Pineapple on pizza.
It'll be a warm-up to the utilitarianism debate.
Yeah. And Dave, what about you? Do you have anything you'd like to add or ask at this point?
No, just that I had a really interesting time listening to you guys talk and the stuff that you discussed. I'm sorry I wasn't much of an addition to it, but I did appreciate it, so thank you.
Awesome. Always good to have you here. So I'd just like to say we're having lots of responses come back to our 10 questions for theists and our 10 questions for atheists. I've been putting all of the video responses where they've been linked to me into a playlist as well. So not only are the 10 questions there on the channel, but you can view all of the responses. We do plan over the coming months to actually start recording some analysis on the various responses that we've got as well. We just haven't had a chance to even start recording them yet, but we're looking forward to coming out with some of those. So you've still got some time if you want to do a response to the 10 questions for theists or 10 questions for atheists, or non-theists. It includes all non-theists in that regard. Then please do drop a link on our channel, and we'll add it to the playlist, and we'll get it.
I haven't done it yet.
What are you doing?
I'm going to. It's on my list.
Videos about
It's
Taylor
on my
Swift.
to-do list.
Ignoring that.
Hey, you know what? I'm just trying to get those views in there. Okay, you know, you gotta make a living somehow. Not doing it yet, but maybe one day Taylor Swift will get me there.
Awesome. So I'd also like to thank everybody in the chat room who has joined us tonight and made all the comments that you've had. You've made it absolutely fantastic. We love the engagement. I do apologize if I missed anyone's questions or comments throughout the entire stream. I was heavily engaged in the conversation, and there were chunks of it that went past me. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Brina for joining us tonight. It's been great having you back on.
Yeah, thank you.
So if everyone doesn't remember, this
here.
is Brina Ryce, so make sure you check out her channel and subscribe. We dropped a link in the chat, but if you didn't see it earlier, I'm just going to link all of you to it right now. There you go, it's in the chat. So
And we'll put it in the description.
I will do my best to remember doing that.
I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay, Dave will do it. There you go. It's not my fault it doesn't get done this time. It's Dave's fault.
Yes. And you can enjoy videos about Taylor Swift and whatever else pops in my brain that day. It's a little messy up there.
And of course, thank you, Luke, Philip, and Dave for being back on the stream as well. It's been a pleasure as always. So, you've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi show. I'm Joe.
I'm Silent Bob.
I'm Luke.
I'm Philip.
And I'm Brina Ryce.
Have a good one, all.
Bye.
Are we not supposed to say bye?
Yeah,
No,
no,
say what you want.
we are. Oh, we're still on. Okay.
Yeah.
I was the only one that said it.
We're supposed to make loads of noise as
I
it
was like,
finishes.
Yeah, I mean,
I
at
thought
this
I
point,
ruined
this
it.
is-
I thought I
no, this
ruined
is-
the ending.
No, it was
No.
perfect. It was perfect.